Chapter 584. Janice was a little surprised. It seemed that Duque was not as indifferent to the internal affairs of the Alliance as the rumors said. According to the Alliance declaration, the moment the Dark Portal was destroyed and the Horde was defeated, Anduin and Duque automatically lost the authority to command the armies of the various countries. All military ranks in the Alliance were temporarily frozen until there was a new threat and they were forced to activate the Alliance again. This was only in the military field. In the eyes of the kings, there were only two commanders in the Alliance, Anduin Lothar and Duke Marcus. Mograine wasn't bad, but he was only at the level of not bad. He wasn't a real commander. As for Duque, after leading the army to save so many kingdoms, almost all of the 11 countries in the Alliance had to respect Duque. This was the main reason why the Barif family was so eager to get Duque on board the ship of Alterac. After the food purchase incident, Janice did not pay special attention to Duque. It felt like in just a moment, the seemingly immature kid that King Lang randomly conferred as a duke had grown into a giant that the Barif family and even Alterac had to look up to. Now that Duque directly mentioned the name that the Barif family and even the remaining forces of the Alterac kingdom were afraid of, Janice understood that Duque was not really content to be the Storm Duke. Janice's feelings were a little complicated. Duque's foresight, which had been proven time and time again, also made the Barif family's heart palpitate. Even her husband Alex had said that even if they succeeded in making Duque the son-in-law of the Barif family, he would not know if it was a blessing or a curse. Unfortunately, the threat from Rotterdam was the most real. Seeing how Duque had disregarded the past and saved Kuel Salis, she could only bet on the fact that Duque was a person with high sentiments. Janice sighed. Since you already know, I hope that you can tell me personally as Lucia's mother. What should we do with Alterac? The Lord of Presto had perfect identification documents. Unless there was a civil war, Alterac could only watch a person of unknown origin become the king of Alterac with the support of Rotterdam and betray the interests of Alterac. Alterac will become one of Lord Darren's provinces in 10 or 20 years' time. Duque gently tapped the armrest of the sofa with his right index finger. This Lady Janice was more intelligent than he had expected. If Janice had asked him in the name of the Barif family, he would have used his identity as the Duke of Stormwind to fool her. The problem was that she had to play the emotional card of Lucia the moment she opened her mouth. Of course, this made Duke a little unhappy. But seeing that Lucia had been with him for so long, and that she was the daughter of a high noble, helping him to work, accompanying him to war, acting as an emissary, and working hard without complaint, Duke really could not ignore it. Duque sighed and asked, "Before I answer your question, let me ask you in the capacity of a half-teacher and half-friend of Lucia. What kind of king do you think Terina's Menethil II is?" Janice was stunned for a moment before replying, "A third-rate military strategist and first-rate politician. As long as he doesn't interfere with the interests of Rotterdam, he is a merciful elder." Janice's answer was very skillful. She revealed her own opinion without slandering the king of a large country. Duque leaned back on the sofa and propped his chin with his left hand. "Since we all think he is a first-rate politician, do you think Terina's would let the person he supported waste a lot of time fighting against the Barif family? You know, the nobles of Alterac have almost all been wiped out. Only the Barif family is left. So what? Whether it's General Haas or the Barif family, we have used our actions to wash away the shame of King Eden's betrayal," Janice argued. Duque was silent. Left with no choice, Janice threw out what she thought was her biggest trump card. "For the sake of the Barif family's all-out effort to save you and the Stormwind Kingdom, and for the sake of Lucia, can't you help Alterac? If we work well, we can make Lucia the queen and you the king of Alterac." His calm gaze, as if he could see through all the secrets in the world, made Janice's heart palpitate. Janice suddenly realized that Duque was the kind of person who wouldn't be moved by mere benefits from Alterac. Duque flipped his right hand lightly, and a map of the entire southern continent appeared in front of him. The next moment, East Elven, East Twilight, Redridge Mountain, Upwind Trail and other areas on the map were all marked with his storm flag. The Swamp of Sorrows and the Cursed Lands were marked in light blue. He threw out a sentence that almost shocked Lady Janice out of her wits. "If I'm willing, Rin and Lothar will support me in establishing a nation with these areas as my territory." Janice cried out in shock. She couldn't help but be shocked. This land was shockingly vast, at least twice the size of Alterac. King Lang actually approved of Duque to this extent. Duque waved his hand and the map disappeared. He crossed his fingers and rested the back of his fingers on his chin, staring at Janice with a determined gaze. But I never had that intention from the beginning to the end, because the third war against the Dark Portal was inevitable. Establishing a country was just a superficial idea. You don't understand what the world of Azeroth is facing. If you could see what I saw, you would know that Lord Darren's greed for Alterac is just a small matter. Duque wasn't trying to scare Janice. In this world, even the Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu couldn't compare to Duque. Duque was familiar with the history of Azeroth's development, and Nozdormu had to pay a price for peeking into the future. Janice bit her lip, seemingly unwilling to give up. Duque, are you really not willing to help the Bear family? Duque was silent for a long time. Only the crackling of the firewood could be heard in the living room. After some time, Duque finally said, I promise I will help the Bear family at the very end. Janice's expression changed. She didn't know what the very end meant, but at the very least it would save her husband and Alicia's lives. But would the Bear family still be the same Bear family after losing the fertile Hillsbrad Hills, Cair Darrow and Dalen Mill? Janice stood up suddenly. Since Lord Marcus is not sincere, please forgive me for taking my leave. Chapter 585. Lady Janice had gone very secretly. Whether she came or left, she did not alert the Windrunner sisters. Duque, on the other hand, continued to play with Aurelia and Sasha as if nothing had happened. That was until mid-December, when Duque found a hot spring by the Windwalker Lake and saw Aurelia and Sasha wrapped in a bath towel. He couldn't hold it in and was caught by Sylvanas. After Duque used the Tree of Life to divert the three sisters' attention, the topic naturally turned to Lord Davar Presto. Wait, why would a human lord make Alexstrasza owe you a favor? The atmosphere had been good, but Sylvanas suddenly changed the topic. Yes, even the uncles in the tavern were bragging that Lord Davar Presto might inherit the throne of Alterac and marry Alicia. Duque, are you really going to let Alicia marry the next king of Alterac who popped out of nowhere? Hearing this, Aurelia immediately pulled a long face, and the demonic aura descended again. She didn't say anything and just walked over and sat in front of Duque. She crossed her arms and tucked her palms under her armpits as if saying, I'm waiting for you to explain. If I'm not satisfied with your explanation, don't blame me for flipping out. Duque still held his chin and smiled. I suddenly realized that Aurelia is quite cute when you're angry. Don't interrupt. Do you know what I want to ask? Aurelia was fuming. At this time Sasha came in as well. Sis, maybe Duque has his own difficulties. Sasha, don't give in to him all the time, okay? You'll spoil him too much. Aurelia was a little angry that she even scolded Sasha. She turned her head. Alright, tell me, are you really not going to help Alicia? Duque spread his hands. Speaking of which, wasn't the original focus of the topic the Tree of Life? How did we end up on top of Alicia? Aurelia rage +1. Duque gave up on acting. Alright, in fact, Alicia's mother Janice came to me once a while ago. The Bear family wants to make Alicia the Queen of Alterac, and then make me the Queen's husband. They want to use my influence as the Alliance's vice commander to fight Terina's. This. Aurelia was a little stunned. Alicia, whose marriage was used as a political tool, was pitiful, but the nobles of Alterac were not kind either. What's more, he wanted Duque to marry Alicia. What about the positions of us sisters? Aurelia was immediately unhappy with the Bear family. On the other hand, she knew that Alicia had helped Duque a lot, so Aurelia was very conflicted at this time. Duque, are you really going to marry Miss Alicia? Sasha felt like she would immediately cry if Duque gave her a definite answer. How could I abandon you and Aurelia for a mere king? With that, Duque pulled Sasha over and kissed her. For the first time, Sylvanas did not feel that Duque being intimate with his sister in front of him was an eyesore. A mere king. The king of Alterac, one of the 7 great human kingdoms, was actually a mere king in Duque's words? If it were any other man who said this, it would only be taken as a lie. Duque was different. He really had the right to be a king. However, he rejected it. He rejected it lightly. How many men in the world could resist such temptation? How many men could maintain their rationality in the face of great benefits and fame? Duque's tone was relaxed and cozy, but the 3 Windrunner sisters felt a heroic aura coming from him, making their bodies tremble with excitement. Aurelia was the most mature and steady elder sister among the sisters after all. In any case, what happened with Wuxia just now also gave her a warning. Duque was technically single. Even if he announced that he was going to marry the sisters, such a marriage would probably not be recognized by the entire human society, nor would it receive blessings other than friends and family. Aurelia spoke up. Yo, it seems that us sisters are quite valuable, even more so than the king. Duque, why don't you tell us what's our price? Duque was slightly stunned. He suddenly understood why Aurelia would attack him at this time. At this moment, Duque was possessed by a movie star. At this moment, Duque was possessed by Stephen Chow. Duque held Sasha's hand with his left hand and moved closer to Aurelia. Then he held Aurelia's hand with his right. Of course, the words were copied, but after some slight changes, they clearly reflected Duque's current feelings. Duque looked at the two beauties who looked alike and raised his head 45 degrees to the sky, deeply in love. Right now there are two sincere loves in front of me and I have decided to cherish them. Because I am afraid that if I lose them, it will be too late for me to regret it. This is the most painful thing in the world. If the goddess of fate forces me to use weight to weigh these two loves, then on the other side of the scale, I will put the entire planet Azeroth on the other side. If I have to add a time limit to these two loves, I hope it will be 10,000 years. There was no Stephen Chow in this world. Naturally, no one would have heard the original version of the love declaration, and no one would have been touched by the popular and widespread. Aurelia was stunned. Sylvanas was stunned. Sasha was stunned. The three Windrunner sisters all froze on the spot as if they had been petrified. They forgot to breathe. They forgot about time. They forgot about the world. How much does a girl want her love to be? Let me ask you, is half of the world of Azeroth enough? How long is a love's time limit? Let me ask you, is a lifetime of 10,000 years enough? If one were to say that she had left her homeland for Duque and Duque had given her land in return, it would only be to shut people's mouths. In reality, it wouldn't bring Aurelia any satisfaction. But this time, Duque's vow really touched Aurelia's soul. At this moment, whether it was Aurelia or Sasha, they both felt that even if Duque was lying to them, they would be willing to die for it. Moreover, Duque's eyes were filled with sincerity. Suddenly, a bean-sized tear rolled down Aurelia's elegant face. Yes, Aurelia was crying. Sasha was crying as well. Sylvanas was crying as well. Eldest and third sister were crying on Duque's chest, while second sister was crying on eldest sister's back. Chapter 586. To be honest, Duque thought of himself as a selfish person. If he had to sacrifice Aurelia to save the world of Azeroth, Duque would never do it. From the beginning to the end he became a hero, just so that he would not become a zombie and so that he could live a better life. Of course, it was purely because Duque did not mind saving the world while protecting himself. That was why Duque became the hero of the Alliance. When the three sisters finally stopped crying, Duque comforted them. Don't think too much. Regardless of whether it was Alicia's matter, the Bear family's matter, Alterax's matter, or even Davor Prester's matter, they could all be dealt with at the same time. Do you trust my ability to plan? Yes. The three sisters said in unison. Then leave it to me. Tarina's won't be able to last long. Let's just be happy and wait for the day of the victory ceremony to go watch the show. After a while, Duque was called away by his subordinate, Darnielle. Sylvanas straightened up and said to her sister, Aurelia, didn't I suggest you to find a way to marry Duque officially? You rejected me back then. Yes. Sylvanas looked in the direction where Duque left and said thoughtfully, I didn't understand then. Now I do. Aurelia gently held her sister's hand. What do you understand, my good sister? The kingdom's marriage laws can only protect wealth and power but not love. For the high elves who live for tens of thousands of years, 100 years is like a blink of an eye for them. Live these 100 years to the fullest and don't leave any regrets. There's no need to care about anything else. Aurelia's face bloomed like a flower when she heard this. Sister, it's good that you understand. Sylvanas smiled. I didn't really look forward to love, but now that I see you guys like this, I'm a little moved. Unfortunately, after seeing you and Duque, I suddenly realized that there really aren't any men in this world that can catch my eye. Second sister, actually, I don't mind. Before Sasha could finish, her lips were sealed by Sylvanas's index finger. Even if you and Big Sis don't mind, I do. A person only has two hands, there is no more space beside him. With that said, Servanas tidied up his clothes, wiped away his tears and left in a carefree manner. At this moment his eldest sister's voice suddenly came from behind. My good sister, I don't care which hero you're with, but you have to control yourself. It's almost time for Lothar to join the ranks of old men. Servanas almost fell to the ground, unable to get up. Time passed until December 22nd. The 25th, 3 days later, was a very special day for both Duque the Transmigrator and the people of Azeroth in this world. This was because in the capital of the Rotterdam Alliance, Rotterdam City, there was going to be a grand victory ceremony to celebrate the Alliance's victory over the Horde. In the territories of the Alliance, because the news of the victory had long spread, many people traveled thousands of miles to Rotterdam City just to see the glory of the victorious soldiers, as well as to watch the ceremony that was about to be held. It was because of the joy of victory but also out of hatred for the Horde. After all, this was a full-scale war that engulfed the entire continent. The destruction and loss of lives caused by the war affected every city and every village in the territories of the humans, dwarves and high elves. As the victory ceremony had been set at the end of November, the citizens of Rotterdam had been discussing it since early in the morning. Have you guys heard? There will be more than 200,000 soldiers from various countries participating in this victory ceremony. I heard that there are 30,000 orc captives alone. Will we be able to see orcs then? I've only seen lords raising taxes and conscription in the countryside. I've never seen what orcs look like. I heard from the nobles that as long as you dare and can afford it, you can buy an orc slave to chop trees for you. We also heard that there seems to be an election for the king of Alterac this time. The former king Eden was killed after betraying the alliance. That human traitor Pyranod. He deserved to die. All kinds of thoughts were intertwined. A storm hidden under the victory began to gather. On the 22nd, in front of the storm fortress in Stormwind City, Anduin Lothar waited for Duque and his party. After seeing Duque get down from the carriage, Anduin welcomed him warmly and gave Duque a big bear hug. Duque. Although your territory is also very important, you have to take care of me and Lang. There's so much to do here. Ahem. How many times have I said don't be so forceful? The marshal forced Anduin to reveal a charming smile. This is my way of paying you back for being lazy. In the next moment he saw Duque stretch out his hand into the carriage and help the Windrunner sisters down one by one. Even Anduin the uncle could not help but smile. Of course he knew that it was etiquette for a man to let a woman help him down the carriage. He also knew that if it weren't for the many politicians in Stormwind watching, the Windrunner sisters would have jumped down the carriage themselves. But he was still a little envious. The noble and elegant Aurelia. The wild and untamed Sylvanas. Gentle as water, Sasha. The three Windrunner sisters who were dressed to the nines, were first-class beauties even in the entire human world. Only the eldest and third sisters were confirmed to be in a relationship. There were rumors that Duque had all three sisters, leaving only the expressionless fourth sister. Welcome, ladies of the Windrunner family. The three sisters bowed together. After some small talk, Anduin smiled and said, well, Lang originally wanted to use your teleportation portal to go to Rotterdam for convenience. The journey back and forth for more than 40 days would definitely be a torture. But the ministers were against it and out of etiquette. Bolvar for Dragon stared at Anduin without showing any weakness. Please be careful with your words, Anduin. His Majesty is the most important person in Stormwind. Before there is proof that the teleportation portal is absolutely safe, this kind of reckless behavior is not allowed. All right. I'm not the king. I can be lazy and use the teleportation portal, right? If there's a choice, I hope that you and Duque will be careful. Bolvar meant that Duque should just use the teleportation portal and fly around randomly, and not involve the other important people. Duque smiled bitterly. After all, this was not the era where even soldiers were sent through the teleportation portal. It was useless to say anything now. Chapter 587. Anduin also knew that he could not win against Bolvar. In fact, Bolvar, the noble duke, had always been the first choice to stay in the country when the three of them were not around. There was no doubt about his loyalty. Unfortunately, Bolvar was too inflexible and inflexible. Anduin shrugged. If I could, I would like to bring the entire Storm Knights with me. Tyreenas is such a miser. He only gave us a quota of 1,000 people for the military parade. If we go beyond that, we'll have to be responsible for our own rations. Duque looked at the hundreds of knights around him, all of whom were envious of the 20 lucky ones who were about to set off through the portal. It couldn't be helped. Although it was good to save time, the teleportation ability of the portal was limited. The Dalajan had gathered so many pharaoh previously, and only sent 1,000 people to grim battle. They could either follow King Lang's example and set off by ship 20 days in advance, or they could reduce the number of people. Andoin suddenly realized that Duque seemed to have brought a lot of people, and it seemed that they were all going to the victory ceremony. Wait, Duque, how many people can you send to Rotterdam at one time? 20 people. Duque said nonchalantly. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of the knights behind Lothar, who had already put on their ceremonial robes, immediately sank. Damn it, there were ladies and maids on Duque's side as well as Gavin, Rad, Casa and the other knights. There were almost 20 people here. Wouldn't that mean that only Lothar could be brought along? Duque suddenly raised his hand to stop Andoin from asking questions. Don't worry, I've recently gained a few new followers who are very good. After saying that, Duque snapped his fingers and a cold humph appeared in the void. It was just a humph, but it actually made the experienced knights feel alarmed. More than one of them instinctively put their hands on the hilt of their swords, even if they were just for decoration. Suddenly, in an empty space not far from Duque, a portal glowing with blue and white light opened, and 4 people walked out of it. This is Lady Legolas, Duque said as he pointed at a red-haired female knight with an impressive bust that almost broke the Stormwind uniform. Hi. The greeting of this tall and voluptuous lady caused a commotion among the knights. Duque pointed to the second person. It was a petite elven lady who wore an emerald green ranger outfit that revealed her sexy belly button. But strangely, she didn't have a bow on her back, nor did she have a weapon on her waist. Moreover, her eyes were closed from beginning to end. This is Ms. Sarah. Actually, she's a druid. Hello everyone. I'm Sala. Her weak voice made the knights want to protect her. There was another commotion. The third was a bronze-skinned male elf with a single ponytail and a single shoulder exposed. He was dressed like a warrior. He stood there in a daze as soon as he came out, as if thinking about life. The fourth was a fellow who wore a wizard's robe and looked like the legendary night elves. The cold humph had come from his mouth. Duque skipped the third person and directly introduced the fourth. This is the Radiant Moon Archmage Dogsh *Kyo Goss. He has a bad temper, please don't take it to heart. The pharaoh named Goss did not notice anything fishy about Duque either. He nodded as a greeting and ignored the others. Nobody knew where Duque had found these weirdos, but one thing was certain. These 4 fellows were definitely not simple. Everyone present was a brave warrior who had experienced hundreds of battles, but when faced with these 4 fellows, especially the 2 men at the back, they all felt a little apprehensive. Lothar dared to swear that he had never felt this way before, even when facing the tribe's monsters called golems that were taller and scarier than the ogres. Be it the passionate Legolas, the gentle and pleasant Sala, or the 2 fierce-looking male elves, they all gave Lothar a sense of extreme danger. Duque, wait. Let's talk in private. Andoin pulled Duque aside and was about to speak. Andoin, I know what you want to ask, but I can't answer you now. However, I can swear on my life and honor that they will never harm Stormwind or the Alliance. Although I hate your mysticism, it's the same for you and Medivh. Lang and I have long learned to get used to it, Lothar said with his hands on his hips, looking helpless. Seeing that Lothar was a man, but he looked like a wife who had been wronged, Duque burst into laughter. Don't complain. At most, I'll let all your men go to Rotterdam to show their faces. At this moment, countless pairs of ears perked up. The humans of Azeroth were founded on the spirit of chivalry, and all they talked about was honor. Now that they had won against the tribe and made huge sacrifices, it was not too much for the knights to proudly participate in the victory ceremony, right? Hence, in a sense, it was also part of human nature to show off. Lothar's facial muscles twitched. Damn it, you're causing trouble for me. Before I went, I spent a lot of effort to choose these few representatives. Now, with just a word from you, all the lads are attracted to you. There are about 500 people here. Are you going to bring all of them? Lothar had a loud voice, and his soft voice was not much different from the shouting of ordinary people. As soon as he said that, the eyes of the lads dimmed. Yes, Duque was a morning star mage. How many people could he teleport? So what if there was a radiant moon mage? Duque pursed his lips, looking like he did not care. He turned his head. Hey Doksh *T. How about you do me a favor and teleport these few hundred people to Rotterdam? Goose tilted his head, pretending not to hear him. Hey, can't you even open a portal? Duque said to provoke him. Goss didn't reply. He didn't even recite an incantation. With a wave of his hand, a teleportation portal that was 2 stories tall immediately appeared in front of everyone. The slightly illusory scenery on the other side. Everyone could tell at a glance that it was the snow-white city walls unique to Rotterdam. Ah! Someone finally cried out in surprise. But in the next moment Goose stopped. The huge portal was like an illusion and did not exist anymore. Only the magic undulations that lingered on the ground told everyone that it was not a dream. Goose stood with his hands behind his back as if everyone owed him money, and did not look anyone in the eye. At this moment the woman called Legolas seemed to be a little angry. Hey, isn't it just something that Duque promised you on my behalf? I'm holding on to it. Why are you making things difficult for Duque? Be good, listen to me. Show some sincerity later and I'll give you one. This time, Goose immediately admitted defeat. Duque turned and smiled at Lothar and his knights. Gentlemen, go and get ready. We'll gather back in half an hour. Chapter 588. Located on the northern shore of Lordaeron Lake, the giant white city of Lordaeron was undoubtedly a very beautiful city. It was still a distance away from the Alterac Mountains. Looking from the west to the east, Rotterdam looked like a typical city with mountains on one side and water on the other. In the distance was a snow-capped mountain, on the right was a clear lake that would not freeze in winter, and on the left was a vast grassland. The atmosphere of the triumphant ceremony had already spread throughout the entire city. Since it hadn't truly been invaded, the few destroyed buildings had long since been perfectly repaired. There were colorful flags and beautiful ornaments that the Rotterdam Kingdom had collected from all over the place. Not a single beggar could be seen on the street. These days, even when they were shopping, people were dressed in festive costumes. The people of Lordaeron regarded it as a disgrace to wear the same outfit for 2 days in a row. Due to the arrival of the dignitaries from various countries, as well as the gathering of a large number of high-ranking officers, the lingua franca with different accents could be heard everywhere in Rotterdam City. At the teleportation portal in the north of the city, the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom who were in charge of the teleportation portal were a little bored. I heard that we'll only be busiest on the day of the victory ceremony. But the Dalajan academic mages are not willing to waste a few days dealing with the nobles. They think it will reduce their time for experiments. Where's Master Antonidas? He and a few Kirin Tor counselors have already arrived. Where are the elves with their noses in the sky? We're here too. Then there shouldn't be any big shots, right? No, I heard that Sir Duke Marcus and Sir Lothar haven't arrived yet. Just as the 2 earth magicians on duty were chatting, one of them suddenly changed his expression. Wait, there is a teleportation request. Isn't it just a request? Where is it? Let me take a look. The mage came over. No problem. A teleportation request from Stormwind City. The password is correct, just open it. The first mage looked like he was about to cry. No, look at the mana required. Why, King of Magic? Isn't Stormwind Sir Marcus the only one who can teleport? How could there be so much demand? There's a team of 100 Radiant Moon Magi? What should we do? Let's open a small one first. Let them send someone over to confirm. Wait. Our magic array. Oh no, it opened by itself. While the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom were in a frenzy, they were horrified to find that the magic crystal, which was supposed to release mana after they activated it, ignored their control and poured mana into the portal on its own. The valuable magic crystal dimmed at an alarming rate. Then, right in front of the group of Rotterdam mages, a huge teleportation portal opened on its own. If this were a time of war, this would be considered an invasion. A portal that was even larger and rounder than the one the Dalajan used to send 1,000-man assault team was opened. For a moment, the mages of the Rotterdam raised their staffs and prepared to fight. However, the 2 Stormwind Knights that came out of the portal looked at each other in their most perfect posture and announced their names according to international etiquette. The Supreme Commander of the Lordaeron Alliance, His Excellency Anduin Lothar and Deputy Commander Duke Marcus have arrived. Impeccable etiquette officer, impeccable military posture. Just as more than 20 mages and hundreds of Rotterdam Kingdom's guards rushed over after hearing the news, 2 rows of tall horses came out in a single file. The Stormwind Royal Knights in formal attire spread out to the left and right as soon as they came out. They straightened their backs and unsheathed their swords. The tip of their swords faced the sky and their palms faced the lower abdomen, allowing the light swords to flash between their eyebrows. Yes, the standard appearance of a big shot. There seemed to be nothing wrong with it. However, every mage of the Rotterdam Kingdom felt as if they were going to spit blood on the wall. Faster thief. Which bastard is so extravagant to teleport horses here? Is your magic mentor a part-time warrior? Did anyone ever tell you that it takes 3 times as much mana to teleport a horse as it does to an adult? Even if the Stormwind Kingdom has money, don't drag the Rotterdam Kingdom down with you. The mages who were guarding the teleportation portal really had the urge to curse in front of everyone. That's right. According to the teleportation agreement, the mana required to open the teleportation portal was split equally between the 2 sides. This was to increase the stability of the teleportation portal and make it fairer. However, the amount of magical crystals consumed just now was equivalent to a year's worth of Rotterdam Kingdom's North Array. If it weren't for Lothar and Marcus, who had a terrifying background, the captain of the mages would probably have run up and scolded him. Lothar, who was riding a horse, appeared. While letting the horse move forward slowly, Lothar said to Duque, "Your follower is really impressive. He can teleport so accurately from such a long distance and it doesn't feel shaky at all. I still remember the first time Medivh played with teleportation. I vomited yesterday's dinner when he asked me to try it." Due to the fact that it was Storm who opened the teleportation portal on their own, the etiquette officer of the Rotterdam Kingdom ran over in a panic and said a bunch of welcoming words. However, Lothar noticed that the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom looked as if their parents had died. "What's wrong with them?" Lothar asked Duque softly. "No, I guess they're heartbroken because the teleportation portal cost them too many magical crystals." Duque pursed his lips and then opened his palm. As if dismissing a beggar, he threw out a large pile of magical crystals from his storage bag. "I've just used up the magic crystals of the Rotterdam Kingdom. I'm sorry, these are for you. If there's more, just take it as a tip." Do you think the people of the Rotterdam Kingdom are poor people who have never seen the world? The leader of the mages didn't even bother to pick them up at first. In the next second, he suddenly gasped and stared at the magical crystals that Duque had thrown on the ground, unable to move his eyes away. In this era, the magical red jade could store the most magic power. However, the magic power contained in the items that Duque had thrown out was clearly far beyond the standard that the magical red jade should have. Such highly concentrated crystals could not be produced at all, and could only be found in ancient ruins. The official name was unknown, but the mages liked to call it arcane light. Such an item was simply priceless in the market, and any one of them would be enough for a Radiant Moon mage to help. Now Duque actually threw out dozens of them casually. Damn it, how rich is this Duke Marcus? The leader of the mages, who had been pretending to be aloof just now, suddenly pounced on those magical crystals like a dog. He was not the only one. The other mages also pounced on them without any manners at all. That scene made Lothar's eyelids twitch. He suddenly had a feeling that Duque seemed to have come this time to cause trouble. Chapter 589. Ignoring the shouting mages, Duque and the rest went to the state guest house in the west of the city after passing through a huge inner city gate. For safety's sake, the area with the teleportation portal could not be in the same area as where the politicians stayed. At this time, the mages of the Rotterdam Kingdom came to their senses. What the hell? How many people did Stormwind use the teleportation portal to come here? There should be hundreds of people here, right? Not only were the people of Rotterdam confused, but even King Lang, who came to welcome Anduin, was confused. Didn't they say that in order to save money, every gold coin would be used to restore the country? Why did hundreds of knights suddenly come here? Where did the warhorses come from? After all, warhorses were not marine creatures. If they were tossed around on the sea for 10 days to half a month, they would either die or be half dead. Warhorses were often sickly when they disembarked from the ship. What was going on with these 300 tall horses that were brimming with energy? You all came here using the teleportation portal? Not to mention Lang. Even the radiant moon court mage behind Lang had his mouth wide open. He could clearly see that there were two black decayed teeth. Andoin pursed his lips at Duque and Lang immediately understood. Duque was causing trouble again. Duque touched the back of his head. Sorry Lang, I didn't tell you beforehand. The situation is a little complicated this time. In any case, teleporting so many people and horses at once might only happen once in a few years. They even arranged transportation. Where did this mage god come from? Lang easily noticed the 4 discordant existences in the team. Couldn't be helped, these guys were too conspicuous. The whole team seemed to take a detour when they saw them. While entering the state guest house with Duque, Lang said, Duque, this victory ceremony is too big. You have to tell me what's going on with them. After entering and closing the door to ensure that no one was eavesdropping, Duque told Lang and Andoin the answer. Several seconds later, the 2 big shots of Stormwind were so shocked that they were unable to say anything for a long time. At the same time, in the main hall of the Rotterdam Kingdom, several kings were holding a salon. Thank you again for your hospitality, Your Majesty. The one who spoke was a tall, black-haired noble. His voice was deep and powerful. Defeating those evil and filthy orcs is your greatest achievement as the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance. We should do something to prevent the remaining traitors from invading our pure alliance. If we succeed. King Tyrrhena's, who was dressed in an elegant gold and white robe, nodded slowly. Lord Darren and the Alliance will remember you, Lord Presto. Through your analysis and absolute evidence, I believe Gilnes and Stromgard have more or less understood the current situation. The elder Xian Greymane nodded readily. Salas Trollbane, who was in the prime of his life, rubbed his forehead. He seemed to be having a headache over Tyrrhena's words, but in the end he still nodded in agreement. Thank you for your understanding, Your Majesties. King Tyrrhena's himself was not short, but Presto's obviously much taller physique still gave him a sense of pressure. The Lord of Presto smiled, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. The 3 kings present were clearly the cream of the crop, dragons and phoenixes among men. But in front of this Lord of Presto, it was obvious that he had the aura of a king more than the 3 of them. This was truly a surprising thing. Presto's short black hair shone neatly and he was clean-shaven. His thin face had the appearance of an eagle, which attracted the attention of many women in the palace. He gave off the feeling that he was more noble than any of the princes. No, it should be said that the 3 kings in front of him were more like country bumpkins. He came to Lord Darren before the Battle of Steel Stove Fort. Presto's perfect etiquette and elegant temperament first won the hearts of the upper class of Lord Darren. When King Janiers returned to Lord Darren on his griffin, even the picky King Xian showed a rare smile. A few months ago, Presto was still an unknown young noble, but now he had become an influential figure. His political views made all the high nobles in the northern continent feel as if they had eaten 1,000-year-old ginseng fruit. All the pores on their bodies felt refreshed. Look at this. First of all, since this was the Lord Darren Alliance, the victory ceremony must be held in the capital of Lord Darren. Otherwise, it would be blasphemy to the entire alliance. Every country in the alliance must send troops to participate in the victory ceremony. The number and type of troops will be decided by King Tyrrhena's. Every noble of Lord Darren was grinning from ear to ear at this point. Similarly, the surrender ceremony must also be held in Lord Darren. All the captives must be brought to Lord Darren for a parade before being distributed by Lord Darren. In fact, the people of Lord Darren can pick the strongest ones and use them to hold a grand gladiatorial tournament to attract spectators and earn back their money. The stronger ones will be thrown into the mines and the weaker ones will be thrown to the allies. Especially Great Chief Orgrim, who had to personally kneel in front of King Tyrrhena's. All the warships of the Horde will be confiscated and distributed to Gilnes and Lord Darren according to the ratio of troops they sent out. Although the warships of the Horde looked poorly decorated, the strong keels and sturdy decks will definitely increase the standard of the navies of the 2 countries by 3 levels. Kuel Salas will continue to send out the rangers to help Lord Darren clear out the remaining orcs in the Tirisful woodlands. Other than that, there were also other minor conditions. The reality now was that almost all of the 11 countries in the alliance had suffered greatly in the war. Even if they wanted to, they would not be able to get anything out of them. However, these measures that did not have much practical meaning could greatly satisfy the vanity of the people of Lord Darren, and even the people of Gilnes and Stormgard. After gaining the trust of the nobles in the north, it was also his suggestion to send the Alterac Eagle Knights, who were eager to clear their name on the battlefield, to transport food before the Black Rock Mountain battle. Those traitors are not trustworthy. Leaving them on the battlefield will only make them a weak spot for the horde to attack. He once suggested that Tarinas take control of the Alterac army, and then split all the Alterac Knights into the various Lordaeron cavalry regiments. Although Stormguard and the other countries also felt that it was necessary to take control of the Alterac army at the time, but after the war they felt that they should not continue to exercise unilateral control over the Alterac army. At this time, Presto stood up again and used his glib tongue to give a reasonable explanation for everything. What was even more amazing was that under a coincidence he found evidence to support his argument. Chapter 590. On this day King Tarinas Menethil II, who was growing old and fat by the day, made a decision that shocked even himself after careful consideration. This decision was so important that he even ignored the news of Duque's high-profile appearance. No, to be precise, he instinctively refused to listen to any news about Duque. Every time Duque appeared, it was equivalent to stealing the limelight from Lordaeron. After carefully confirming that the cards in his hand were all indestructible, and that Duque would not be able to shake them, Tarinas ignored Duque. For the past 3 days, Duque had been living a comfortable life. As soon as Legolas and the other 3 arrived at the Rotterdam Kingdom, they opened the teleportation portal and left after entering the state guest house. They would not return until the morning of the 25th. The 3 Windrunner sisters were the same. They went to Alterac Mountain to play. Duque, on the other hand, was either bragging to Kale, that's, drinking with Magni Bronzebeard while talking about high-mobility combat, or discussing with Kudrin Wildhammer about the Angerman slalom and the energy theory of aerial combat. These 3 days, Duque basically drank until dawn, then slept soundly, woke up in the afternoon and then had banquets, dances and cocktail parties. He did not seem to know that in Lordaeron, there was a girl whose fate was bound, staring in the direction of the guest house with a sad expression. 3 nights in a row nothing happened. On the night of the 24th, the girl once again looked in the direction of Duque. Duque seemed to have drunk too much and unconsciously walked out of the balcony. He should have been satisfied. But for some reason the girl prayed for more. Prayed that Duque could hear her, prayed that he could hear her prayers. A miracle happened. A beautiful rose appeared in Duque's hand as if he was performing a magic trick. It was an ice and snow rose made of pure magic. In the dark, the rose was so crystal clear, so dazzling, but because of the angle between the trees, it could only be seen from the girl's direction. The girl almost doubted her eyes. She rushed into the room and took out a telescope. That's right. That rose, which should have been unique in the world, did not disappear. Duque seemed to have sensed the girl's gaze, and the smile on his face did not disappear. She had been imprisoned and under the strictest surveillance. She couldn't even send out a note or a magic message. How did he know? No, everything was no longer important. Through the binoculars, she read Duque's lips. Duque only said 2 words. At this moment, tears suddenly flowed down her beautiful face like a dam that had collapsed, and they flowed down her beautiful face. He remembers. He still remembers. That night no one else knew about this little episode. In the blink of an eye, it was December 25th. It was a day that the entire alliance would remember. Unfortunately, the grander the day, the more problems there were. Why did you cancel our victorious return formation? We can accept to appear in any position, but what right do you have to revoke our right to participate in the victory ceremony? In the temporary military camp outside the city, General Haas of Alterac couldn't help but roar at the ceremonial officer from Lordaeron, Count Frankie. Behind him was a team of 300 royal guards. Count Frankie didn't mind Haas's anger at all. Your king Eden Pyrenod betrayed the alliance. Alterac is already a disgrace to the alliance. We allowed you to participate in the war just to let you atone for your crimes and wash away your shame. Now we're holding a victory ceremony to welcome the heroes of the alliance. You sinners have the nerve to stand side by side with the heroes? King Pyrenod is a traitor. We admit it too. But our Eagle Knights, from the beginning of the war to the end, we lost 80% of our people. It's good to be cannon fodder. It's good to charge back at the charging horde. We gritted our teeth and persevered. We thought we've used our achievement points to wash away the shame on us. It was already agreed that we could participate in the ceremony. Why did you suddenly say we can't? Haas's chest rose and fell rapidly. His weather-beaten cheeks were covered in tears. The quarrel here even alarmed the armies of other countries. What happened? It seems that Lord Darren suddenly doesn't want Alterax's troops to participate in the victory ceremony. They're already here. Aren't they messing with us? The soldiers of the various countries discussed, but no one dared to step forward. After all, it was the capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom which was the strongest among the alliance countries. Today was a big day for the Rotterdam Kingdom. How could they not give the alliance some face in the territory of the alliance? No one knew why the Rotterdam suddenly wanted to target Alterac. Even though everyone sympathized with the troops that had been fighting on the front lines of the alliance, no one dared to stand up for them before they could figure out the situation. At this time, two unexpected big shots appeared. The Alliance Commander Anduin Lothar. The Alliance Deputy Commander Duke Marcus. The two actually came together. What happened? Lothar's trademark loud voice was very suitable for calming the situation. General Haas's first reaction was joy, but in the next moment his expression darkened again. The Alliance army had been disbanded and the armies now belonged to each country. They were just formally under the banner of the Alliance. Were Lothar's words still useful? To be honest, after hearing Count Frankie's words, Lothar frowned deeply. This matter was not easy to handle. They were allies after all. To be honest, everyone had contributed to the fight against the orcs and shed blood. Why make things difficult for Alterac at this time? No matter how slow Lothar was, he instinctively smelled the smell of a political conspiracy. General Haas. Duque suddenly said, "Did you bring the armor you used before? I'm not talking about those things that are just for show." Haas quivered. He suddenly realized what Duke wanted to do. His voice trembled as he said, Yes, of course. Those are our real merits. Yes. Scars were the merits of a man. Duque said in a deep voice, "Put them on. We the Knights of Stormwind will wear them too." Haas couldn't believe his ears. He couldn't help but subconsciously look at Count Frankie of Rotterdam. Count Frankie screamed on the spot, and raised an extremely exquisite scroll in his hand. "Duke Marcus, what do you want?" This was a direct order from His Majesty Terina's Menethil II, and the order was here. It's not only an order from the King of Rotterdam, but also the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance. Chapter 591. Hiss. As the sound faded, the surroundings became deathly silent. Terina's was trying to force the Alterac people into a dead end. Wasn't it just because Alterac made a mistake and let the horde in? Lord Darren did not fall in the end. Was there a need to hold such a grudge? To be honest, everyone felt that King Prianod's betrayal was very shameful. In the beginning, everyone also felt that the Alterac Eagle Knights were shameless. But how did they do it? Withstanding the endless humiliation from the Alliance, they charged at the front and retreated at the back. Many times they were completely crippled. But what happened? How many times did the 1,000 knights fight and half of them died? When the knights died, the knight candidates took over. When the candidates died, the apprentices took over. Using the weapons left by their predecessors, they hammered the curved armor piece by piece before using it again. They had already washed away the humiliation with blood and bravery. Anyone who had a little understanding of the Eagle Knights would not look down on this iron-blooded army. Now with a single order from Terina's they had been eliminated. How could they accept this? Duque had made a name for himself. But now that the Alliance army had been disbanded, Duque was just a Grand Duke. As a lord of the southern continent, did he have to offend the strongest king in the northern continent? Daneth Trollbane peeked at Duque's ridiculously young face. He should not have had any hope, but he was still a little expectant. Muradin Bronzebeard and Cudrin Wildhammer took a step forward, but were pulled back by Magni Bronzebeard, one in each hand. He is Duque. It was very simple, he was Duque. That magical Duque. Since the Alliance was formed, he had created countless miracles, and had been coordinating with almost every deputy commander of the Alliance. If Duque really did not do anything, then his title of miracles would cry. That was what everyone thought, and that was what they all hoped for. At this time Duque smiled. His voice suddenly became loud and clear. Today is the Alliance's victory celebration. Today was not Lord Darren's victory celebration. You're just a dog that has never been on a battlefield and barks without the leash Terina's gave you. If you can understand human language, then get lost or I'll make you get lost. As his words fell, the entire world was shocked. How dare Duque? Duque really dared to do that? Almost every Alliance warrior who witnessed this scene stared at Duque with bulging eyes. The blood in his chest suddenly surged to the extreme. They didn't even dare to breathe, afraid that they would miss this historic moment. Duke Frankie was like a dog whose tail had been stepped on. He almost jumped up. Duke Marcus. You're just a duke. How dare you disobey His Majesty Tarina's Menethil Tus order? Are you done? Duque smiled and gestured to Lothar not to stop him. Lothar lowered his head and held his forehead. All right, I hope you really know what you're doing. The next moment there was a loud slap. A hard slap landed on Count Frankie's oily face. It was called lightning, but that was only relatively speaking. Duque's attack was in slow motion to the warriors present. Duque was slow, but Frankie was even worse. It was like a snail being robbed by a tortoise and then reporting. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. He was too fast. Alright, that was just a lame joke. What everyone was more concerned about was that Duque hit him. Duque actually slapped Frankie while he was holding Tarina's order. The slap made the oily guy's mouth crooked. You dare hit me? Count Frankie covered his face like a little wife who had just been bullied. His eyes widened in disbelief, and for the first time, there was an emotion called fear on his arrogant face. Without giving him time to react, he slapped him again with the back of his hand. Slap. This slap was even heavier, causing him to see stars. He actually spun around and fell on his butt on the snow-covered ground. His luxurious purple pants looked like they were stained with a pile of *T. What are you doing? Only then did the captain of the Imperial Guards behind Count Frankie react, and he suddenly pulled out his sword from his waist. After all, he was originally sent here by Tarina's to hold down the fort, to suppress the disobedience of the other countries. Now, right in front of him, his messenger was slapped, and he was slapped twice when he showed the king's order. How could Rotterdam hide its face? Get lost. Duque shouted. With the help of magic amplification, a loud voice exploded in the joint army camp like thunder. Along with this roar, hundreds of hands of magic suddenly appeared out of thin air. After just a second and a half of casting, the same number of arcane shock, as the hands of magic suddenly blasted on the chest of the soldiers of the Rotterdam Royal Guards. 300 people were sent flying at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. Donna's Trollbane opened his mouth wide in astonishment. The Bronzebeard brothers and Kudrin raised their war hammers high. The Knights of Stormwind and Alterac hit the shields with their swords. The dwarves hit the shields with their war hammers and cheered loudly. The elves whistled at the rangers. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of Alliance soldiers, the 300 people were all sent flying for a few meters and they fell on their butts. All of them were dizzy from the fall. Before they could get up, Duque's next attack arrived. Slap, slap, slap. A mage's hand appeared on the collar of each royal guard's breastplate. This kind of mage's hand lifted him up with one hand, and then the other mage's hand quickly followed up and slapped him. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. A slap in the front hand, a slap in the back hand. Back and forth, these arrogant people who only had eyes for Tarina's and did not care about the politicians of the various countries were slapped hard again and again. How many slaps were slapped? No one could count. Anyway, they were all handsome and good-looking, and all of them were slapped swollen by these hands of magic that suddenly came out of nowhere. Well, a team of male model-level Imperial Guards could now be renamed as the Pighead Army. It wasn't that no army of Lordaeron discovered this, and Abendis was the one who rushed over. But even he was shocked. He didn't expect that Duque would dare to turn against him like this. But the glory of the country. Just as Abendis was about to do something, he suddenly felt an extremely terrifying pressure. The endless pressure made him feel like a frog being targeted by a giant poisonous snake. He had no way to resist it all. To die or not to die, it all depended on the mood of the existence that seemed to be at the top of the food chain. Abendis's back was instantly drenched in sweat. In front of him, Duque flipped over and got on his horse. He raised the Grand Marshal's staff high up and shouted to the sky, "Today. This is the Alliance's victory ceremony. Anyone who killed orcs for the Alliance, anyone who has shed blood for humans, dwarves, and elves is qualified to participate. This has nothing to do with national boundaries, only fairness and justice. If you are a man, come with me. If the people of Lordaeron don't give you glory, I, the vice commander of the Alliance, will. Let's go. Chapter 592. They used to think that mages were cowards who only knew how to hide in the safe areas behind the warriors who were fighting in the front. Hence, in the hearts of most of the Alliance soldiers, no matter how good Duque's strategy was, or how good his internal affairs and logistics abilities were, he would always be the deputy commander of the Alliance. The real commander was still Anduin Lothar, who dared to charge to the front line and fight the orcs. No one felt that there was anything wrong with that impression of Duque. Today Duque used his actions to subvert that impression. It was not right to say that it was subverting. It should be a more exaggerated sublimation. Seeing this scene, every soldier suddenly felt a fire burning in their hearts. Without comparison, there would be no contrast. They were all killing enemies for the Alliance. Who didn't want to return home in glory and enjoy the cheers and praises of the people after the war? For the soldiers of other countries, returning triumphantly in Rotterdam City was completely different from returning triumphantly in their own capital. All right, Rotterdam was the leader of the Alliance. They had just finished the final battle at the Dark Portal, and they had crossed the entire Eastern Kingdom from the southernmost tip to the northernmost tip. They were rushing with all their might and they were marching almost every day. Well, when they finally arrived, they found that everything was a waste, be it supplies or camp. The Allies ate black bread made from moldy millet. It was thick and hard and it could be used as a stick to beat people up. Even the auxiliary soldiers of the Rotterdam ate white bread that tasted good. It was freezing cold and the Allied soldiers who rushed over had no supplies. The Alliance soldiers here had to report several times to get a set of linen clothes. They were shivering from the cold. The people of the Rotterdam could get their own cotton clothes. They were treated differently. The people of the Rotterdam acted like they were the best in the world, and their attitudes were actually just one sentence. Without the support of the Rotterdam, you're all a motley crew. Letting you participate in the victory ceremony is a gift from the Rotterdam. Hurry up and thank us. Which family had not been bullied before? Who would have thought that they would have to be bullied after coming to the Rotterdam? At this moment, Duque's actions were simply satisfying. From the soul to the heart, the intense flames were boiling in every blood vessel and burning in every cell. Follow him. Follow him. Follow Lord Marcus. Yes. We've all bled for the Alliance, we've all given our lives. Why is there a difference in treatment? Countless swords and spears were raised high into the sky. The blade, which was stained with the blood of the orcs, glowed with a faint red light. Countless shouts converged into a loud sound that exploded in the camp. Duque rode his horse proudly and walked side by side with Anduin towards General Abendis, who was guarding the entrance of the camp. Get out of my way or I'll step over your dead body. Abendis shuddered. He saw the look in Duque's eyes. Duque was clearly saying, I saved you once, but I can also take back your life. Damn it. Duque was serious. General Abendis was one of the higher-ups, and he knew what King Tyrrhenas was planning. He also felt that his king was a little unkind, but he was still the king that he had sworn to serve for the rest of his life. His body trembled and his mouth twitched for a long time before he managed to say, Duque, is it worth it? Duque did not answer him directly. He leaned over and whispered into Abendis's ear, if the entire Alterac was destroyed, I would have nothing to say. But now, if the leader of the Alliance can occupy the territory of his allies, then there's no need for such an alliance. His voice was not loud, but it was not soft either. It was enough for Abendis and Lothar to hear. At this moment, Lothar suddenly understood Duque's intention. Duque, I support you. Lothar's loud voice easily caused even louder cheers behind him. At this time, the victory ceremony of Rotterdam City had already begun for an hour. In the first half of the ceremony, it was the most eye-catching ceremony of the captives. 25,000 orcs had their hands tied behind their backs, and they were shackled with iron shackles that weighed at least 50 kilograms. They were then tied up with thick iron chains and strung up in groups of 100. They lowered their heads and walked through the long and wide streets under the gaze of countless people. At first, the orc captives attracted the attention of the citizens. Oh my God! They're too burly. Are our warriors supposed to fight against such monsters? Look at their fangs. They're even more violent than the teeth of a wild boar. Holy light above, our brave warrior actually defeated such an opponent. Soon, after a short period of amazement, it was ushered in a frenzy of anger. Bastard! Give me back my husband. A lady on the balcony on the second floor threw the first rotten tomato at the orcs. Give me back my father. A young child who was about 7 or 8 years old threw the first stone. In just a few seconds, thousands of objects flew out from all corners of the street and poured onto the captives. The citizens could not rush past the 2 lines of city guards on the street, so they could only vent their anger in that way. The Battle of the Dark Gate this time had almost swept through all of Rotterdam's territories, from the Silver Pine Forest in the southwest to the holy city of Stratholm in the northeast, and then to the core of Rotterdam city. The heavy loss of human lives was shared equally among almost every family. Even if they were not in mourning, it was more or less the same. Every orc captive had a bloody nose and swollen face, and even their fangs were broken. However, they did not dare to resist and even roared at the top of their lungs. They just lowered their heads and were escorted through the long street. Among the 25,000 orcs, there was only one who held his head high, Chief Orgrim. His mouth was sealed and his legs were shackled tightly to a metal plate that weighed 2 tons. His wrists were also shackled tightly and he was kneeling just like that. However, his head had never been lowered. Behind the cage there was a sign with the words, Chief of the Horde, written on it. This caused Orgrim to suffer the most attacks. The stones and rotten tomatoes that were thrown at him almost drowned him to death. Even the soldiers who were wearing heavy armor to prevent themselves from being smashed to death by the citizens' attacks were too violent. In the end, they had no choice but to let the mages blow away the objects around Orgrim. Hang him! Hang him! Hang the chief of the orcs! The angry citizens raised their fist high and let out a monstrous roar. On the main balcony of the palace, King Tyrrhenas and his children, Arthas and Kaliel, looked at the scene with satisfaction. After the captive offering ceremony, it was time for the real victory ceremony. Countless handymen who had long been prepared, quickly rushed out of the alleys of the city with brooms and other things. They cleaned up the debris on the streets with great agility and proficiency. In just 10 minutes, the road from the north gate to the royal palace was cleaned. At this moment, Tyrrhena's expression suddenly froze. It was because he saw through the binoculars that the mountain eagle flag of Altrank followed closely behind the storm lion flag, flying at the north gate of the Rotterdam kingdom. Chapter 593. Tyrrhenas almost spat out a mouthful of blood on the white jade balcony railing. His script was perfect. If he wanted to take over Alterac, he could not make the Alterac people into war heroes. If he let the Eagle Knights attend the ceremony, it would be a hindrance to their next move. That useless Frankie. Didn't I give him the order? Tyrrhenas almost wanted to order his men to hang the idiot who did not do his job well. It was too late now. They had already entered the battlefield. Were they supposed to let Mograine chase the Eagle Knights back? But who let them in? What was Abendus doing? Wait. Where did the horses in Stormwind come from? Tyrrhenas trembled slightly. The Stormwind Knights had arrived. As the first kingdom to fight against the orcs, and also the first kingdom to be destroyed by the brutal horde, the Stormwind Knights were the first victorious team to enter the battlefield, which had a special meaning. This was out of the expectations of the people from Lordaeron and the people from other countries. What they saw was not a knight in shining armor, nor was it a majestic steed with well-groomed hair that was incomparably clean. They saw a large group of warriors who had returned from 100 battles. Even though it had been cleaned, bloodstains could still be seen on the armor. It was full of uneven marks and there were even cracks caused by heavy weapons. Only a new piece of metal was embedded on it like a patch. Some of the knights' shields had obvious holes. That was the result of the troll throwing their spears. The sword was still sharp when it was pulled out. But upon closer inspection, one could see the unevenness on the blade. Those were the marks of the sword being polished again. The Alterac Eagle Knights were almost the same. What was more special was that many of them carried more than one sword and many of them were broken. A qualified knight's sword was worth a lot of money. Normal steel swords cost at least 3 digits. So the tradition of knights was that when an older knight thought that an apprentice was qualified enough to be a knight, he would give a knight's sword to the apprentice. This was a legacy and also a promise from the older generation to the younger generation. A knight was only allowed to have one sword at a time. There was only one circumstance in which a knight was allowed to carry multiple swords. That was, when he returned from the battlefield he could bring back the swords of his elder or comrade who had died in battle. The long sword was the knight's tombstone, and also the knight's epitaph. The blood-stained swords that were even broken into two completely announced the fate and will of their owners to every audience. Countless people from the Rotterdam kingdom gasped. The kind-hearted girls sobbed uncontrollably. They had heard of the betrayal of the Alterac king, and they had publicly insulted the Alterac people countless times. But they had never thought about how much the Alterac knights had sacrificed in order to wash away this shame. Behind them were the Storm Guardians from Riptide Fortress. They carried the shields of their fallen comrades, and those charred shields told of the Red Dragon who had still belonged to the Horde at that time, and how powerful his attacks had been. The Dalajan raised the broken tower shields and hand crossbows. The cult Tiras carried a row of broken scimitars. There were many, many more. The warriors of the Alliance used the truest way to show the cruelty of war and the greatness of the warriors to the people who had stayed behind. There were no loud slogans and no triumphant expressions. The troops of the various countries advanced in silence. Perhaps an hour ago, the people who had not experienced the cruelty of war did not understand how the seemingly weak humans could defeat the ferocious beastmen. Now they all understood. That was what the warriors of the Alliance had exchanged with their blood and lives. They had fought for it with their greatest courage and the firmest will. No one knew who was the first to clap. No one knew who was the first to cheer. On both sides of the silent road, cheers suddenly rose to the sky. Warriors! Good job. Thank you for fighting. Without you we would all die. You are the true heroes of the Alliance. I love you, I want to marry you. Whose tears were flying. Whose heart was trembling. Whose throat was it that was roaring. When the applause, cheers and shouts swept towards the victorious warriors, every warrior of the Alliance could not help but tear up. At this moment their hardships and the sacrifice of their comrades suddenly felt that it was worth it. Long live the Alliance. Long live the warriors. The sun shone on the warriors' not-so-bright armor. Each armor seemed to be burning with raging flames. An indescribable brilliance rose from the warriors' bodies. Even the radiance of the sun could not cover such a bright light. It was a radiance that came from the soul. It was a radiance that symbolized courage. So much so that everyone could not bear to look away from these warriors. At this moment the onlookers also gave the warmest cheers to the dwarves and high elves. Suddenly, the Rotterdam army, which was supposed to be the finale, appeared. Very strangely, countless people stopped what they were doing. There was no applause, no cheers, no rain of petals falling from the sky. Even the people of Rotterdam stared at the army of their country in disbelief. After seeing such a realistic, triumphant team that was so close to the war. The white horses that were so gorgeous that they looked like they were participating in a dressage competition. The pieces of brand new armor that were so shiny that they could be reflected in a mirror, and the light and gorgeous rapiers that were hung on the waists of the knights. Almost everything was deeply stimulating people's eyes. In an instant, everyone felt a burning pain coming from their eyes, piercing straight from the depths of their eye sockets to the depths of their hearts. If they did not see the allied army led by Duque and Andoin, perhaps they would applaud these seemingly gorgeous and mighty things, and the girls would scream at the handsome knights. But now, everyone felt that the last appearance of the Rotterdam knights was simply a blasphemy to this tragic and unparalleled war. The people of the Rotterdam kingdom felt that they had been fooled and humiliated, especially when they saw the young nobles who were ignorant and incompetent, and could barely ride their horses, sneaking into the victorious return team. Get out. This is the festival of the warriors. Yes. Get out. The Rotterdam does not need trash like you who pretend to have military merits. Get out. Get out. Get out. Tens of thousands of voices converged together and soon, everyone consciously adjusted the rhythm of their roars. Get out. Get out. Get out. The roars were like the raging waves of the sea. The curses were earth-shattering. At this moment, Tarina's face lost all color. Chapter 594. What kind of hatred and resentment was there for the people of their own country to oppose the army of their own country? For a long time, the nobles of Lordaeron had lived a luxurious life, and had long forgotten the voice of the people. To them the people were just wheat that would automatically grow every year. They had all kinds of responsibilities and obligations. They had to pay taxes to the nobles, provide labor for the nobles, and provide soldiers when the country was in danger. After more than 2,000 years of peace, the nobles had long forgotten that their ancestor was a warrior conferred by Emperor Saladin. This warrior's name was Lordan, and this warrior's son was called Menethil. Later on, Menethil named the land Thoradin the Great as Lordaeron, and Menethil became the royal family's surname. In that era where clans were the dominant force and there were no surnames, this was already a pioneering move. Suddenly being opposed by the seemingly docile people, not only Tyrrhena's, but all the Lordaeron nobles around him were embarrassed. "This is a pity," Xian Greymane said. Jean Greyman said, "It seems that someone down there has mistaken the difference between a triumphant return and a grand parade." Of course, Tyrrhena's did not know that this proud and aloof King Gilneas, who seemed like a standard politician, would one day become the most reliable ally of the alliance. He only knew that Xian was taking advantage of the situation. That's right. After Lord Presto appeared and presented the evidence, Xian secretly offered to support a nephew of Presto. Xian secretly offered to support a so-called nephew of Prianod's, who could not have been more distant, but Tyrrhena's rejected him cruelly. Now everything was different. Looking at Anduin Lothar and Duke Marcus at the front of the victorious team, Tyrrhena's knew that all of this had something to do with them. If he did not do anything, it would not look good during the throne meeting, even if he forcefully passed the resolution. "I'm getting old. I want to rest before the triumphant return to the palace. Why don't we all rest in the side hall?" Everyone knew that Tyrrhena's could stand from dawn to dusk if the situation was favorable. Now that he suggested it, everyone knew that this was another round of quick and urgent political transactions. As the representative of Kuel Salus, Prince Kael, that's understood that this was a political game in the human world and had nothing to do with the elves. He was the one who truly rested. Lang and Dallin looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Now that Tyrrhena's was taking advantage of his old age, he could not allow the old king to rest, could he? Lang and the other two nodded quietly to each other. They were going to meet up later. All of a sudden, the balcony of the palace that was more than 100 square meters became empty. Not a single king was paying attention to the victorious procession that would begin to arrive at the square in front of the palace in 20 minutes. In the side palace, Tyrrhena's pushed open the huge golden door. The magnificent murals on the wall had always been his greatest pride and joy. Unfortunately, he was not in the mood to appreciate them now. The first to meet was naturally Jean. Xian was extremely greedy towards Tyrrhena's, but because of that he was the easiest to convince. "Yo, Tyrrhena's, it seems that little Duque has given you quite a bit of trouble." "It's just trouble," Tyrrhena's said with a cold expression. "Tell me, what do you want in order to support Pristos?" "I want the Hillsbrad Plains, the Jasper Mine, Tobalad Island and the western coast next to South Shore." He knew that Jean would ask for a lot, but he did not expect him to be so greedy. He took away more than half of the essence of Hillsbrad in one go. The Hillsbrad Plains had been reclaimed by the refugees of Stormwind. Now everyone knew that it was a rich and fertile land. The refugees would all be evacuated next year. With the support of this fertile land, Gilnea's power would increase explosively in the next 20 years. Tyrrhena said with a pained expression, "All right." The second to meet was King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard. Tyrrhena spoke first. "Salas, you must support Lord Pristos this time. I can give you Terran Mill and South Shore." Salas sat in his luxurious chair like a statue. After a long while he shook his head and said, "Maybe their king and lord are guilty, but the people of Riptide Castle can't take Alterax's land. It's a blasphemy to our brave warriors." Tyrrhena's panicked when he heard Salas' words. Among the 6 human kingdoms, Kurtiras and Stormwind, who were outsiders, would vote against him. He needed at least 4 votes from the throne to make things look good. Who would have thought that Salas would reject him? Yes, that's right, Tyrrhena's plan was to take Lordaeron's land for himself. Now that Salas was involved, he refused to play. How could he do that? Tyrrhena's face darkened. "Think about it, Salas. Your land has already become a wasteland. Even your food for the winter is provided by Lordaeron. You can be noble, but can you bear to see your people starve to death? The earthy highlands do not have much food to begin with." Salas' expression changed. Tyrrhena's was threatening him with food. South of Stromgard was the dwarves' territory. Whether it was the wetlands or Loch Moden, the dwarves barely had enough food for themselves. Other than Hillsbrad in the west, there was no other way out of the earthy highlands. If Alterac, controlled by Lordaeron, blocked the way out, then hundreds of thousands of people would starve to death. To restore Earthy's food production, his advisors told him that it would take at least 3 years. Moreover, he still had to rebuild Riptide Castle, which had been destroyed by the dragon. Salas lowered his head deeply, as if burying his head between his knees. I don't want the territory. Give me at least 500,000 tons of food every year for 5 years. As a noble knight, he hated political deals like this. As a king who was responsible for the future of millions of his people, he had no choice but to compromise with Tyrrhenas. Tyrrhenas left. He was not satisfied, but at least he had achieved his goal. At the third meeting, Tyrrhenas met the hardest nail, Antonidas, who he thought would be easier to convince. Tyrrhenas, I'm not against you. But the Dalagan rejected the Lord of Prister. Why? Tyrrhenas furrowed his brows. Because the Kirin Tor Assembly has secretly used all of their magic detection abilities, but still could not see through this mysterious Lord of Prister. He is either a Breaking Dawn mage on par with me, or he has a mysterious magical item that is comparable to a demigod gear. We will never support a mysterious person of unknown origin to be the king of Alterac. Chapter 595. No matter how hard Tyrrhenas tried, he could not convince Antonidas. From Tyrrhenas' perspective, this unreasonable archmage wanted to send someone he liked to Kirin Tor's dissection table to see what this mysterious person was made of. Tyrrhenas thought back to what Lord Presto had said in private. These crazy archmages are not good people. Your Majesty, have you ever thought that before opening the portal to grim battle, Antonidas would have sensed that there were a bunch of tribal chiefs there? Why did he insist on sending all of Lordaeron's elites there? Nearly 1,000 of Grim Battle's elite knights had died, and this was a pain in Tyrrhenas' heart. At the thought of this, he suddenly became distrustful of Antonidas. That's right, it was the great Tyrrhenas Menethil Tus idea to make Lord Presto the king of Alterac. You bastards only have 2 choices. Obey obediently or get out of my way. Antonidas, you're wrong. Letting a truly noble person rule Alterac, not a despicable traitor, is the wish of all the other human kingdoms. For the time being, I can't think of anyone better than Lord Presto. If there is, please let me know. If not, then I hope you can follow the will of Lordaeron. Also, if you are not suitable, the Alliance can still remove King Presto in the future. Antonidas was so angry at Tyrrhenas that he wanted to vomit blood. Since when was the Alliance above the king's power? Would that kid of unknown origin still be so obedient when he went up on stage? Would he give in so easily and leave the stage himself? Tyrrhenas, you won't have a good ending if you keep using force. Don't forget, Duque has already made his move. Even though he knew that Tyrrhenas hated Duque the most, Antonidas did not mind Duque being implicated. King Tyrrhenas immediately thought back to that time. That time he tried to use the lower nobles to threaten the Bear family and control the whole of Alterac. In the end, the people he sent out were hit with iron white gloves countless times and became useless. On the surface, that mission had nothing to do with Tyrrhenas, but everyone knew that it was a slap in the face to the Menethil royal family. Humph. Duque won't be able to save the Bear family, Tyrrhenas said firmly. The drumming of the guards of honor outside grew louder and louder. The triumphant procession was about to reach the palace. Unless Tyrrhenas was seriously ill, he would have to go out and welcome the victorious warriors. Antonidas, promise me that the Dalagan will at least remain neutral on this matter. Otherwise, the Dalagan will be the enemy of the Rotterdam kingdom. After this is done, I will compensate the Dalagan. This was a blatant threat. Antonidas looked like he had just eaten shit. He almost had a stroke. After a long time, he squeezed out a word through his teeth. Okay. The kings who had just rested gathered again. In the huge square of the palace, Tyrrhenas received the cheers of more than 100,000 citizens. No matter what, it was the Rotterdam Kingdom Alliance, and the Rotterdam Kingdom was the leader of the alliance. This was an honor that no one could take away from him. After symbolically inspecting the captured orc weapons, Tyrrhenas walked in front of Orgrim. Originally, it was a very satisfying thing to have a great chieftain of an enemy force, whose strength was on par with each other, kneel to him. Being pressed down by 4 strong humans, the weak Orgrim could not take it anymore. Even his neck was almost broken. He lowered his proud head to Tyrrhenas. Unfortunately, he already knew that Orgrim did not have anything nice to say. Otherwise, Orgrim would have said the classic "orcs will never be slaves" line. Tyrrhena's was not interested in Orgrim's submission. To him, the orcs were a bunch of poor people. Not only did they cause trouble, but they also had nothing to gain from it. Other than being used as miners and gladiators, they had no value at all. So he pretended to accept the cheers of the 100,000 people and ended the victory ceremony hastily. After entering the palace, just as the kings were about to sit down in the throne room, their true intentions were revealed. "Wait," Xian suddenly said, "not everyone has the right to enter here. Those who have the right to enter the throne room are either the kings and representatives of the various countries, or the heroes of the alliance. But now there is a traitor here." King Gilnes's declaration shocked the dwarves and elves. "Traitor?" As Xian pointed, everyone's eyes immediately fell on Duke Berev, who was about to walk towards Alterac. Not only Duke Berev but even General Haas, who was behind the Duke, suddenly turned pale. Duke Berev was attending the throne room as Alterac's representative. To accuse a country's representative in a meeting like this, how much hatred was there? Without sufficient evidence, this was definitely a huge matter that could push an entire country to its death. "What evidence do you have?" Duke Berev was trembling as he pointed at King Xian. "Evidence? Of course I have it." Jean snapped his fingers and the door to the side hall suddenly opened. 12 guards escorted 2 young men dressed in ordinary, but still relatively clean clothes into the hall. Looking at the 2 faces that looked similar to Duke Berev's, everyone knew that the mystery was solved. "I think many of you have seen these 2 before. They are the sons of Duke Berev, the first and second in line to the Berev family, Wilton Berev and Alex Berev." Duke Berev felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body trembled even more violently. He said in a trembling voice, "They disappeared long ago after the Alterac incident. I've already issued a declaration to strip the 2 unfilial sons of their inheritance and drive them out of the family. From that day on, everything they did had nothing to do with Duke Berev or Alterac. Now the only heir of the Berev family is Wuxia Berev." "You stingy old man, how could you give the family's fortune to that bitch?" "I am the only heir of the Berev family." "Oh, it's me. Well, then go to hell. I am the true heir of the Berev family." The 2 unfilial sons of the Berev family were already fighting amongst themselves without Xian's words. Duke Berev argued back, "That doesn't prove anything?" Xian dropped a bomb with a smile. "Yes, but everyone must know that it was because these 2 from the Berev family joined the horde that Orgrim's army was able to easily pass through the mountains of Alterac, avoid all the sentries, and kill their way to Lordaeron like a divine army descending from the heavens." Chapter 596. Boxes were carried out by the Rotterdam guards. Xian waved his hand. "This is the map of the Alliance's military deployment around the Alterac Mountains. There's also their pledge of loyalty to Orgrim. Oh, there's also the pledge of loyalty from all the Alterac nobles led by Piranad." Duke Berev's hands were trembling as he picked up a document. He had nothing to say because the Berev family was in charge of the logistics of the entire Alterac Mountains. On the other hand, because he deliberately did not decide on an absolute successor, and wanted his 2 sons to compete for it, it caused his subordinates to split up, each supporting a certain prince. It was hard to guard against a thief in the family. Even the higher-ups of the Berev family who gave the map to Wilton and the Alex brothers did not expect them to betray their father long ago. Duke Berev also did not expect that the first mastermind was the dead Eden. He had used these 2 rebellious sons to get information. After the 2 brothers left for the tribe, these things fell into Orgrim's hands. There was no way to explain that these maps were indeed leaked by the Berev family. Even if it wasn't sh*t, it would still be sh*t. The guards of the royal family of the Rotterdam kingdom passed the ironclad evidence to each of the kings. Even if they knew about this long ago, and even if it had been a long time ago when they saw the signatures of the Alterac nobles, they still felt an indescribable anger. It was not just the kings. Only 2 attendants were allowed to stand behind each seat, and they had the same expression as their master. Of course, there were exceptions. The 3 commanders, Andoin, Duque and Mograine, had their own seats. Unexpectedly, Andoin and Lang had brought Legolas and the other 3 that Duque had invited. Behind Duque were Wuxia and Aurelia. Last night, Duque had insisted that Duke Berev let Alusia follow him. Duke Berev now understood. Alusia's body was trembling slightly. She could fully understand how her father, who was being condemned by everyone at this moment, was being interrogated and tortured mentally. You two tell me everything you know. This is your final salvation. Jean waved his hand. Therefore this pair of bastard brothers vividly told the truth, that they knew. In their words, the Berev family had pledged their loyalty to the Horde even earlier than Eden Piraeus, in order to prevent their rich territory from being affected by the flames of war. However, the Berev family's way of doing things was smarter and more in line with the style of nobles. That was to bet on both sides. As the only two heirs of the Berev family at that time, they first went to Orgrim to gain his trust. Prince Berev, on the other hand, stood aloof and unyielding. In this way, no matter if the alliance won or if the Horde destroyed the alliance, the glory of the Berev family would continue. Two sides, aren't they? However, this was indeed the style of a businessman. And the Berev family was such a family with a strong merchant atmosphere. There were witnesses, material evidence, motive, precedent, and background. Everything made sense. At this moment, almost all the kings believed it. Even King Dai Lingua looked at Duque suspiciously. On the other side, if not for Duque's warning, even King Lang would have believed it. However, even Lang was skeptical. If it wasn't for the fact that he had never done such a thing before, even Alex Berev himself would have believed it. The old duke's heart sank into a bottomless, icy hell. He looked at his two sons who had become greedy due to their lack of discipline, and allowed themselves to be manipulated by those clever politicians. Suddenly he laughed maniacally. Ha! Ha! Loud and unbridled laughter reverberated throughout the entire throne room. What are you laughing at, you despicable traitor? King Jean scolded. No. I'm just laughing at myself. I gave birth to my sons, but because of the family business I did not teach them well. In the end they turned into two super bastards. Old man, watch your mouth. We are both traitors of the alliance. What right do you have to laugh at me? Faced with the scolding of his two sons, Duke Berev's laughter grew colder and colder. He looked at his sons as if he was looking at two dead men. Foolish sons. Do you think those greedy bastards who are after Alterax's land will honor their promise to you two idiots? Honor? Maybe they will. But if they give you the property and land today, they can take it back next year with a random excuse and send you to the gallows. No one would really protect two traitors of the alliance. The old duke hit the nail on the head and told the truth, which really made the two stupid sons shiver. Jean suddenly felt that the situation was getting out of hand. He turned to look at Terenas. Terenas knew that this was all the sly old fox Jean was willing to do. He glanced at the expressionless Duque and pretended to stand up. All right. Since His Majesty Grameen has presented the evidence that Duke Berev is a traitor of the alliance, do you have anything to say? Or rather, Duke, do you have any evidence to prove your innocence? Evidence? How could there be any evidence to prove his innocence in such a matter? It was as stupid as asking you to prove that your mother was your mother. Duke Berev trembled. He knew that if King Guinevere and King Lordaeron dared to plot against him, they would not leave any loopholes. In front of these two absolute rulers, a duke who was not even a king was just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. In fact, his two idiotic sons had indeed joined the Horde. He did not look at Duque. From the moment Duque refused to cooperate, he no longer had any hope that Duque would help him. His only hope was that Duque could protect Alusia. The old duke raised his head proudly. King Menethil, you win. What do you mean I win? Terenas said shamelessly. This is the alliance and we value fairness and justice. If there is enough evidence, even the testimony of a king can be overturned. Alusia, who was standing beside Duque, could not hold it in any longer. She slowly reached out with trembling hands and tugged on the sleeve of Duque's robe. 1 second later, at this unexpected moment, Duque suddenly raised his right hand and requested to speak. Terena's heart skipped a beat, but he pretended to be calm. Sir Marcus? Duque smiled. I would like to interrogate the Horde's great chief Orgrim. I would like to hear from him whether he captured the Berev brothers in the Alterac palace, or whether he received help from the two brothers. Chapter 597. Anduin would never forget how his treasured sword, Quell Zarum, was broken. That's right, his sword could not harm a person of noble character. If he was not 100% sure before, Then everything that happened after he brought the shard back to the Archbishop of Holy Light, Alonsis Vale, and placed it in the holy pool in Stratholme confirmed his suspicions. This was because the shattered divine sword was actually being reforged by itself. Although it was slow, it was indeed being reforged. In other words, if this deduction was correct, then Orgrim, as a person of noble character, would definitely tell the truth, even if it was related to a duke of the opposing faction who was not important to him. Anduin's eyes lit up. I agree with Lord Marcus. We need the testimony of the Horde's chief Orgrim as an important witness. King Leon shuddered at this moment, and he immediately understood why this was happening. After all, Lang's once invincible sword was broken at a crucial moment on the battlefield, and he almost lost his best friend. This made Lang feel conflicted for a long time. I agree as well, Lang chimed in. Duke Berev raised his head. He was stunned, but there was also a hint of hope. His Duque did not abandon him when he was at his most desperate. He did not know what the point of interrogating Orgrim was, but at least it was a hope. At this time Tyrrhenas spoke. Summon the chief Orgrim if he is still sane. A servant left after receiving the order. At this moment Duke Berev, Lang and Anduin all felt their hearts skip a beat. After a moment, as expected. Your Majesties, the Horde's great chief Orgrim has suffered a severe mental shock due to today's captive offering ceremony. He seems to be going crazy and is struggling non-stop. We have no choice but to add 2 sets of the largest shackles on him, each weighing 100 pounds. That's right, Tyrrhena's words were a hint. After realizing that Orgrim, whom they had been neglecting, could be a flaw and a variable, they made up for it. Perhaps they used some kind of drug to temporarily make Orgrim lose his sanity. All of a sudden, all chances of turning the tables were gone. Duke Berev's face was ashen. Anduin was a little puzzled. With Duque's intelligence, he shouldn't have given his opponent a chance to make up for his flaws. What was Duque trying to do? Tyrrhenas spoke. Then, there seems to be no other way. We can only follow Orgrim's confession. Do you have any other requests or new evidence? If not, then we will hold a throne vote to decide whether or not to label the Alex Bear family as traitors of the Alliance. The air was filled with silence. Tyrrhenas ignored the doubtful and disapproving looks as well as the sobbing of Wuxia. Then let's begin the voting. The throne voting was the highest form of voting in the Alliance. At first, in order to prevent the commanders from coming from the same country, the commanders themselves did not have the right to vote. Each country would have 1 vote and the leader of the Rotterdam Kingdom would have 2 votes. The countries involved had no right to vote. They could vote for, against, or abstain from voting. The motion would be decided by the result with the most votes. If the number of votes for and against is the same, the Alliance country will be the final decision. Kings who think that the Bear family is a traitor, please raise your hand. Jean was the first to raise his hand, followed by Salas and Antonidas and finally Tyrrhenas. Now, according to the Alliance leader's double vote, there were 5 votes. But that was it. Tyrrhenas suddenly felt a little uneasy. He pretended to be calm and said, "All right, those who object, please raise your hand. Those who abstain from voting, you can remain silent." Lang was the first to speak. This time, the voting rights of Stormwind will be given to Duke Marcus. Almost as soon as Lang finished speaking, Duque spoke. His voice was loud and full of authority. Stormwind objects. King Daelin frowned. As one of the staunchest allies of Stormwind, he immediately followed. Kurtiras objects. A situation that Tyrrhenas had never expected had happened. He had thought that the dwarves would take an indifferent attitude. He even knew that Lang did not communicate with the dwarves about this. Unexpectedly, when Magni saw that it was Duque who objected, he slammed the armrest of the throne. Cosmodin objects. Along with Magni's loud voice, Kudrin Wildhammer said, Eagle's Nest Mountain objects. Who was Magni Bronzebeard? He was the leader of the dwarves, the Ironforge Bronzebeard dwarf. He was on the same side as the gnomes. Magni objected and Master Craftsman Jurban immediately followed. Nomarigan objects. At this moment Tyrrhenas's face turned green. He finally saw it. These bastards did not look at the evidence or reason. They simply objected because Duque objected. Rather than believing in objective things, they believed in Duke's judgment, who had truly helped them. In this suspicious matter they clearly stood on Duque's side. Alright, now it was 5 against 5. In theory, if this was the final result, Tyrannus could still use his power as the leader of the alliance to pass this motion. The problem was, there was still one country that had the right to vote. Suddenly, all eyes fell on the face of Prince Kale, that's of Xianxia, who represented the Sun King in the victory ceremony. The handsome Kaiser's face was burning hot. He never thought that he would be involved in the battle between the leader of the alliance, Tyrannus, and Duque. Before this, there was no news of this at all. No country's representative came to him. This was definitely a political disgrace for Xianxia, because it meant that the High Elves were being marginalized in the political arena. Of course, in a sense, this was also the result of the High Elves' long-term self-isolation. Personally, he should definitely help Duque. Unfortunately, he knew the mood of the kingdom very well. Even though Duque led the army to save Xianxia still sent a lot of reinforcements to the Alliance's army in the later stages of the war. In fact, the entire upper echelons of Xianxia hated Duque. Simple jealousy. What they could not do, Duque did. They could not protect their own kingdom and they still needed Duque's help. The arrogant elves' faces were dark. Moreover, the counselor Marion they sent was said to be a servant of the Wings of Death and was captured by the Red Dragon Queen. Many counselors could not take it emotionally and could only secretly vent their anger on Duque. Therefore, in public, Kale, that's could not help Duque. After a long while, Kale, that's finally said, Xianxia abstains. Chapter 598. Kale, that was in a miserable situation. He never thought that things would turn out this way. Right now he was stuck in the middle with no one on either side. After Xianxia was invaded, Kale, that's had a clear understanding that the era of isolationism was over. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but it was right to have a good relationship with Rotterdam. On the other hand, it was also irrational to offend Duque, the smartest person in the entire alliance. Not only did he feel like his long-term emotional investment had gone to waste, but he also had an ominous premonition that came from fate. This made Kale, that's very uncomfortable. If he didn't want to play it safe and wanted to see the situation clearly before making a decision, this wouldn't have happened. If the previous vote had already been decided, Xianxia wouldn't have to be a clown. He never thought that after Lang handed over the voting rights to Duque, the 5 heads of state actually completed 5 votes in 3 seconds, and all of them were against. This pushed Xianxia to the top of the wave. After shouting out the word abstain with all his courage, Kale, that's mouthed an sorry to Duque. He didn't know how much of Duque's impression of him would be restored by doing this, but if he didn't do anything he would never forgive himself. It's okay. Duque didn't mouth it but said it out softly. You heard at least half of the kings. This made Kale, that's feel awkward again. Someone else was the one who was really embarrassed. Tyrannus was forced to a dead end. He had never imagined that the alliance would be split because of a duke from a small country. He was so close to being slapped in the face. Of course, he could suppress the accusation of Duke Barev's rebellion for the sake of the alliance's harmony. That way he would have to face a lot of opposition in the country. All his previous plans against Alterac would be for naught. In fact, from the beginning, Tyrannus knew that it was impossible to completely annex Alterac in a short period of time. So from the beginning he used a more indirect method, such as handing it over to someone who was trustworthy, talented, and seemed to be interested in peace and unity. Unfortunately, it seemed that even the first step of clearing the obstacles for Lord Prestel's ascension to the throne was met with great resistance. He really wanted to kill Duque. Why did the Stormwind Kingdom publicly announce that all the refugees would retreat within a year, and that they had no intention of touching any part of the Rotterdam Kingdom's territory at all? Yet, at this juncture the Rotterdam Kingdom was stuck between a rock and a hard place. If Wuxia was really Duque's woman, Tyrannus might be more wary, but no matter how many times he checked, the maids of Rotterdam swore that Wuxia was definitely a virgin. He really did not understand why Duque, who had no interest in Alterac, would protect Duke Barev. Tyrannus Menethil gripped the king's scepter tightly in his hand, the muscles in his face trembling, and he took 3 deep breaths. He still made a decision. According to the Iron Law of the Alliance, I hereby, as the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance, declare that although there is no concrete evidence to prove that Duke Barev was involved in the rebellion against the Alliance, the Barev family of Alterac is guilty. Yes, he was still guilty. If he didn't announce it, all of his plans would go up in smoke. Lord Darren's losses in the war would be irreparable. Lord Darren, the strongest human kingdom, would lose all of its face. The price he paid to Xian, the political capital he used to threaten Salas, and the consequences of forcing Dowran to obey him would all go down the drain. He would have to bear all of it himself. There was no turning back. Tyrrhenas had no choice but to declare it, even if it meant offending many kingdoms and the most legendary hero of the alliance, Duke Marcus. On the other side, Elucia's body trembled, but Duque held her hand. Elucia looked up in disbelief and suddenly heard Duque's words. I express my extreme regret for this sentence, and Stormwind reserves the right to protest in the future. Duque was going to go against Tyrrhenas. According to the alliance, the punishment for traitors will be decided by the leader. Tyrrhenas decided to ignore Duque's words, but in his heart he was already a little afraid. Originally he was going to sentence Duke Berev to death because Duke Berev's influence in Alterac was just too shocking. If he did not clear the obstacles, he did not know if Lord Presto would be able to fully control Alterac. His biggest mistake was to misjudge Duque's influence in the alliance. Tyrrhenas stared at Duque and saw the threat in Duque's eyes. His heart skipped a beat, but he gritted his teeth and changed his words. In the name of the leader of the Rotterdam Alliance, I announce that in view of the Berev family's full support to the alliance, their crimes will be reduced. Duke Berev will be stripped of his title and demoted to a commoner, and all of the Berev family's land will be taken away. Their land will be controlled by the future king of Alterac. Alex Berev and his family will be allowed to leave with all their belongings, but will be banned from entering Alterac for the rest of their lives. This is the final sentence. Almost as soon as he finished speaking, Duke Berev seemed to have aged several decades in an instant. From a man in his twilight years he became an old man with one foot in the grave. At this time Duque's voice rang out again, what a regrettable sentence. All right, I will also take this opportunity to announce that Countess Elucia Berev of Stormwind will be granted the Redridge Mountain, Lake of Tranquility and Lakeside Town. A slap in the face. A direct slap in the face. Even though Duque did not do anything, Tyrrhenas felt as if he had been slapped countless times by Duque. His face felt like it was on fire. On the other side, he used his authority as the leader of the alliance to strip the Berev family of their roots. In this era, land was the foundation of everything. As long as there was fertile land, the family and even the kingdom would be able to prosper forever. Duke, on the other hand, followed the rules of the game of nobles, directly turning Elucia Berev from a nobleman with no roots into a real noble in the truest sense. Everyone could see that Duque was not willing to cut off the Berev family's roots for Rotterdam, and was going after Tyrrhenas to slap his face. No one understood why Duque would do this. But at this moment Elucia, who was standing diagonally behind Duque, had tears streaming down her face. She suddenly made a shocking decision. She raised her head and said loudly, I announce that I, Elucia Berev, will renounce the Berev family name. Chapter 599. Elucia was very brave. This was an era where bloodlines were very important. Almost every noble considered themselves descendants of Thoradin the Great. In fact, even the current royal families of the Seven Kingdoms were mostly companions who fought alongside Thoradin the Great 2,800 years ago. For example, Tyrrhena's ancestor, Lordan, and Sora's Trollbane's ancestor was given the surname Trollbane by the Great. No one could deny the importance of a noble bloodline in the human world. Everyone knew that since Duque dared to protect Elucia, the Berev family would not be severed in the distant future. In a sense, as long as Elucia still carried the name of Berev, even if she was defined as a traitor, although this traitor was questionable, she would still be a noble daughter. Under the premise that Duque refused to marry a princess of the Seven Kingdoms, even if he married Elucia and changed her surname to Berev, no one would think that there was anything wrong with Duque. On the contrary, the Marcus that Duque made up was a lowly surname in the eyes of the nobles. And Elucia's announcement of giving up her surname was actually out of good intentions. She did not want Duque to offend the strongest human kingdom, Lord Darren, because of her. That was the thinking of the nobles of Azeroth. Tyrrhenas heaved a sigh of relief when Elucia made that declaration. In the eyes of many kings and nobles, Duque's side had given in. Giving up the surname meant that the lineage was broken. Even if you had the so-called noble bloodline, No nobles would recognize your bloodline unless it was absolutely necessary. Who knew? Duque was not going to have it. Shut up. Eluhia, your 2 brothers should be hanged, but your father is not guilty. Taking away the fief is already the biggest punishment for you and your parents. Since His Highness Menethil did not take away the surname of Barov. You don't have to, and you don't have the right to give her up. The count under me can only be Lucia Barov and not a woman without a surname. As soon as these words came out, the throne room simply shook the earth and mountains. Crazy. He was going crazy. Duque was going to fight Tarinas to the death. What kind of enmity did they have with each other? Generally speaking, there was no enmity of killing one's father or stealing one's wife, nor was there any feud between the 2 countries. It was impossible for there to be such opposing emotions. What was Duque doing? If it was in private, Tarinas would have exploded like a volcano. But this was a throne conference. You are condemning Prince Barov. He is conferring a daughter, and in theory it is not the same thing at all. Tarinas trembled violently as if he had been electrocuted by Yang Shosho. Duque wasn't just slapping him in the face, he was slapping him in the face, peeling off his skin, spitting on him, peeing on him, and finally playing disco dancing on his ancestral grave. If he didn't do something to suppress Duque today, then he really wouldn't be able to survive in the future. Only Lang and Andoan knew that Duque was not giving Tarinas any chance at all. They looked at the 4 guards behind them and chose to remain silent. Take your father away, Countess Elugia. After instructing Elugia to support the old Duke who could barely walk, Duke Barov left. Duke once again looked at Tarinas. Tarinas finally made his move. He stood up and raised the king's scepter high. Today is a day of celebration for the Alliance's victory. We have expelled the traitor Barov from the Alliance. Today is also a day of celebration for the 11 countries of the Alliance. I believe that there should be no empty seats on the 11 thrones, so I would like to introduce the descendant of the Alterac royal family, the Lord of Pristo. First, the door to the side hall opened and a group of Rotterdam royal family guards walked in, each holding a copy of the identity document of the Lord of Pristo. In this era, the most important thing to prove a noble's bloodline was a genealogy. A set of magically preserved genealogy was the most valuable evidence. Then, with a so-called ancestral relic, and a simple blood test to match the marriage partner between nobles with the royal genealogy of other families, they would basically be 100% confirmed as descendants of nobles. Seeing this, Duque was dumbfounded. Damn, this is the so-called absolute proof? Forget about DNA, there wasn't even a blood test. Duque felt like he was in a trance. Acting pretentious was actually this simple. If I had known earlier, I would have also gotten myself a pretentious genealogy and then made up my name to be the Kaiser and Caesar emperors who followed great Emperor Saladin. Duque silently looked at the group of kings and nodded. Then the main character of the day finally appeared. Many people thought that the Lord of Pristo's expression would be even happier. After all, it was not every day that someone became a king. Of course, the hereditary one was not one of them. When the 5-meter-tall main door of the main hall opened with a trumpet, Lord de War Pristo walked out from the fully opened magnificent door. Many people who saw this lord for the first time were shocked. Lothar was already very tall and burly among humans, but this Lord of Pristo was even taller. At a glance he was at least 10 meters tall. For humans this was the domain of giants. He wasn't fat, but he wasn't tall and skinny either. He wore a black and silver-edged robe that fitted him very well. The deep black gave others a noble and elegant impression, and the silver lines outlined his perfect figure. Of course, the most eye-catching part was the ferocious dragon head embroidery on his left chest. The ferocity of the dragon head leaping out of his clothes was even more powerful than the lion emblem of Stormwind. At this moment he clearly hadn't participated in the war against the Horde, but he just looked like a mighty war hero. It was rare for Aurelia to tease Duque at a time like this. Duque, he looks more like a hero in the Alliance than you do. Just like, Duque replied calmly. Lord Pristo first saluted Tarinas, then bowed elegantly. From the north to the east to the south and then to the west he repeated this gesture in every direction of the throne room. It was an incomparable gesture of etiquette. It was as if only when this young noble was here, the soft, smooth curtains, golden chandeliers, and even the pure white marble steps could make this throne room look grand and majestic. De War Pristo greets your majesties and commanders. After greeting everyone, Presto stood straight like a javelin in the middle of the throne room. Chapter 600. The kings had mixed feelings about this. Even though they knew that this was the only candidate that Tyrrhena's had chosen to inherit the Alterac kingdom. Many of the kings already had an instinctive resistance when they heard about this, and they had a bad preconceived impression of him. However, when Presto stood up, everyone had a feeling that this man was someone who could be trusted by everyone under any circumstances, and was also someone who deserved to be trusted and respected. Amidst the slightly confused atmosphere, a few gasps of admiration rang out at the same time. If only Arthas had him like this. If only Tanreed could be like him. William still has room to improve. If it was Tyrrhena's, they could say that he was biased. However, the praises came from Daylin and Lang, two kings who had different political views from Tyrrhena's. One had to admit that this lord was very charismatic. On the other side, Antonidas secretly injected arcane power into the blood vessels in his eyeballs. This was a very risky thing to do. If the arcane power went out of control, he would be blinded on the spot. The uneasiness in his heart made him do this. Damn it. Even this didn't work. In the vision created by the arcane power, the figure standing in the middle of the hall was like a giant black hole, sucking in all light and heat. It was as if even the eyes that were filled with magic were going to be sucked into it. Oh, it wasn't just as if. The power that came from the mysterious domain was using an unparalleled suction force to suck Dalaran's eyeballs out of his eye sockets. Antonidas could only feel his consciousness starting to collapse. Slap. With the last of his consciousness, Antonidas slapped his old face. The crisp sound attracted the attention of all the kings and representatives. Oh, sorry, there's a mosquito. Antonidas hurriedly lowered his head. He still felt that the mysterious lord was up to no good, but he had no evidence at all. Should he tell the kings in front of everyone, Lord Presto has a divine artifact on him and he stopped me from looking at him? Can you ask him to take that divine artifact down so that I can use my arcane power to look at his body? If he dared to do this, he must be crazy. Who was Davor Presto? He was the only one with the bloodline of the Alterac royal family, and was destined to inherit the Alterac kingdom. As long as he went through the motions, he would be able to sit on the empty throne and be on equal footing with the other 9 kings and representatives. Antonidas decided to remain silent. Tyrrhena's cleared his throat and said, Lord Presto, this is no longer the time when the countries are isolated from each other. The invasion of the Horde was cruel and terrifying, but it also brought about a great unity among the 4 races that had not been seen in the past 3,000 years. As the leader of the Rotterdam Kingdom Alliance, I think as an elder, I hope that you can introduce yourself to the kings and tell them how you want to get along with the various allies in the future. King Tyrrhena's stroked his bearded chin in satisfaction. He was looking forward to the debut of the lord who had never disappointed him. In his eyes, Lord Presto was perfect. Presto raised his head and stared at the sky with his eyes that were as deep as the night. Or, his cruel. Just this sentence, just this opening that was full of masculine charm, caused a silent uproar among the kings. For this terrible war, the alliance has sacrificed too much. The fertile farmland has been turned into scorched earth. Millions of farmers became soldiers and sacrificed their lives on that great battlefield. Now the war is over, but all of us in the alliance must work together to rebuild this continent, feed the people and bring life back to the land. I saw a report that made my heart ache. The Alterac kingdom is less than half of what it was before the war. But just to the west of the Alterac kingdom, the fertile silver pine forest that originally belonged to Guinevere and Rotterdam has been turned into scorched earth that cannot be cultivated for many years due to the infernal weapons. When Presto said this, Duque's eyebrows twitched. This blame is on me? Presto did not notice, or perhaps he noticed but ignored Duke's reaction. He continued, in the east the few highlands of Arthi were burned by the dragon breath of the Red Dragon army that belonged to the Horde's camp. In the throne room, Salas Trollbane's face twitched in pain. It doesn't take much imagination to predict that if we don't change everything, hundreds of thousands of people will die of famine next year. What a sad thing it is. Lord Presto's passionate voice quickly infected all the kings. Even the kings who were already aware of this felt the same way. If I become the king of Alterac to make up for the mistakes Alterac made in the war, and to make up for the relationship with the surrounding countries, I will only choose to keep the farmland around Stanbrad, because this small amount of farmland is enough to feed 60,000 Alterac citizens. Briar and Caer Darren were loaned to Rotterdam, Hillsbrad Plains were loaned to Gilness, Rotterdam Mill Plains were loaned to Dalaran, and Terran Mill and South Shore Town were loaned to Stormguard. Each place will be rented unconditionally for 20 years. As soon as he said this, the kings were shocked. This was so generous. Although these lands originally belonged to the Barra family, and although he was also the king that Tyrrhenas supported, he was really willing to give them away? Aurelia giggled and said to Duque through the whisper of the wind, "Duque, why do I feel like he's more generous than you?" Duque replied with a sentence that could do anything. On the other side, the kings of the 4 countries were moved. Some of them were part of the deal, but some were added by Lord Presto himself. Tyrrhenas didn't want Briar and Caer Darren at this time to avoid looking too unsightly. Everyone knew that the so-called loan, it was easy to not return it after borrowing it. There were many such things in the history of Azeroth. After thinking for a while, Tyrrhenas spoke. "Thank you for your generosity, Presto Lord. But this is not a good precedent, so please forgive Lord Darren for rejecting your kindness." But Tyrrhenas changed the topic and said to Salas, "I think Rapid Hold needs Alterac's selfless help more than any other member of the Alliance. If King Trollbane doesn't object, then let's sign the loan contract under the witness of the Alliance." Chapter 601. Tyrrhenas was very smart. He let Trollbane, who was originally just a passerby, take the blame. Did Salas have a choice? He immediately understood what Tyrrhenas was trying to do. Isn't Riptide's stronghold in need of food? Then start with this first. Otherwise, if they don't want it, don't expect to have food next year. What else could he say? Salas could only nod bitterly. Then I thank you on behalf of the people of Stromgard. But it won't take as long as 20 years. At this time, Salas suddenly met Xion's reproachful gaze. He had to change his words. All right, then Stromgard will accept it. As long as Alterac asks, we will return the land next year. Now it was obvious that they were saying, "Do you dare to take the land if they are willing to give it to you?" With Salas as the first target, would the other kingdoms be far behind? Daelin, Magni, Kudran, Kael. These kings and representatives who had no need for Alterac's land all frowned. On the surface, everything seemed to be going according to the rules. Anyone with a discerning eye would immediately realize that this was actually 3 rogue kingdoms pulling a kingdom that had no choice but to submit. In the name of justice and cooperation, this was the cruelest way to divide up a weak kingdom like Alterac. Almost every king and representative who did not participate could not help but ask themselves, is this the kind of alliance our kingdom wants? At this time, Lord Presto suddenly bowed deeply. I am impressed by the greatness of Lord Darren. But, Your Majesty, you may not think for yourself, but I hope you can think for the people of Silverpine Forest who have lost their land. How about this? Your Majesty's beloved daughter, Princess Kalia, is the most beautiful person in the world. If I ascend the throne, please allow me to propose to Princess Kalia with Briar and Cael Darren as betrothal gifts. A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. The other kingdoms who were still a little suspicious finally saw Tyrrhenas's moves. First, he used real or fake evidence to get rid of Duke Barav, the most powerful person in Alterac. Then he supported a real puppet to take over. Finally, he used a royal marriage to solidify their friendship and alliance. Of course, 10 or 20 years later, if this King Presto accidentally died, then the little prince with Menethel's royal blood would become king. What was annexation? This was annexation. Humph. Daelin and Magni snorted coldly. Kudran and Jurban didn't know that much, but when they saw Magni's cold snort, they also followed suit. It sounded like a humming duet. Tyrrhenas was embarrassed to be sneered at by the 4 kings. However, Brill and Caer Darren were 2 super fertile lands. The show could only go on. Tyrrhenas pretended not to hear and put on the face of a kind elder. If Kalia doesn't object. I'm sorry, I'm a father before I'm a king. I need my daughter's approval. Of course. Presto bowed deeply again. The kings did not have to wait for long. Princess Kalia, who had probably been waiting for a long time, arrived. After not seeing her for a long time, Princess Kalia had become even more beautiful. A 16-year-old girl was at the golden age of beauty, starting to transform from a young girl to a mature woman. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Princess Kalia seemed to have grown a little taller. She looked even taller and she easily wore this pure white lace dress that looked like a wedding dress. She had a head of brilliant golden hair, which looked dreamy under the light muslin draped over her head. Her jade-white skin was nurtured by the water of Lake Lord Amir. Only this white veil made from mooncloth could compare to her skin. This was a compliment and it was also a fact. In this era of handicrafts, unless one could get their hands on the legendary devil's cloth, the moon cloth that was purified by the night elves' moon well water would have the whiteness and smoothness of white snowflakes. Princess Kalia's skin had reached this stage, and her beauty had risen to the level of a work of art. The jade-like face under the white veil seemed to have matured a little, but the aura of a young girl still dominated. Looking down, the pair of breasts that were not small to begin with seemed to have grown a little. Although this size was slightly smaller than Aurelia's, who could say for sure that Princess Kalia would not have the legendary second puberty? Looking down, it was clear that her waspy waist had gone through the torture of the waist corset. From a distance, it already looked like a matchstick. Under her slender waist was a gorgeous pleated gauze dress that looked like a blooming white peony. Princess Kalia looked like a beautiful bride today. While the kings were marveling at Princess Kalia's beauty, they were all secretly cursing Terina's tricks. On the other side, Lord Presto had already walked forward, knelt on one knee and took out a gift from his space storage bag. This world's most beautiful rose, for the world's most beautiful you. Countless kings exclaimed. It was a very beautiful rose made of ice crystals. They had no idea how this ice rose, which looked cold from afar, was made. Under everyone's gaze, the rose reflected the most psychedelic and moving rainbow colors under the sunlight that shone through the huge glass window. Beautiful beyond compare. Mesmerizing and dazzling. No girl who was in love for the first time would not like this kind of special gift that was so dazzling and beautiful that it could not be described with words. Unless this girl had seen better with her own eyes. Princess Kalia looked very apologetic and then she yawned. Yes. A yawn that symbolized boredom and contempt. A yawn that made Lord de War Presto confused, and made King Terina's suddenly feel that something was wrong. King Terina's suddenly understood why. Kalia was a good and obedient child. She knew her fate from a young age and would never dare to resist his will. But the other's gift was not good enough, and he could not force Kalia to force herself to admit that this was the best gift in the world, right? Damn it. At this moment, Terina's felt like killing someone. I'm sorry, Lord Presto. Although I would like to say that your rose is the most beautiful in the world, I cannot lie as a believer of the holy light. As she said this, Kalia took out what looked like an ice rose from her space storage bag. Under the dazzling sunlight, every single ice rose petal was clearly visible. Layer upon layer, they formed a blooming rose. Not only that, but there was a faint flame flowing between the cold petals and petals flickering. Just this dreamlike appearance alone caused the kings to exclaim in surprise. Presto was stunned. Terina's was stunned. Many kings who had not seen this before were stunned. Chapter 602. If Lord Presto's gift to Princess Kalia was a work of art, then what Princess Kalia brought out now was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. Now what Princess Kalia had brought out was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. A godly masterpiece. It was a god-level masterpiece. When the kings could not help but exclaim in admiration, King Terina's slapped his forehead. He could not believe his eyes. If Presto had given a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? If Presto had given her a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? Was he not looking for trouble? With Duke's incomparably perfect magic rose as an example, any lesser rose would be a disgrace that would be thrown into the endless sea. Goss, who stood behind Lang, had been squinting ever since he entered the throne room, as if he did not care about anything in the world. However, when he saw the magic rose made of ice and fire magic, he said, "Not bad." This comment made his other three companions look at him. After all, he did not care about all the magic of the elves and humans in the world. But now, Duque's rose was worthy of his not bad comment? Terina's regretted giving Kalia the best space storage bag. That thing could stop the time of non-living things. But it was too late. Lord Presto's face finally lost his composure. He could hear the whispers from the thrones around him. Sigh, Why did he have to compete with Duque, who looks like a morning star wizard, but is actually more skillful than a breaking dawn wizard? This first impression is terrible. It's fine, it's just a bet. Turning back is not a given. Some kings discussed, some laughed coldly. But for the first time, Duque felt the malice from Presto. Duque's troubles did not stop there. The whispers of the great demon king came from the wind. Duque. So you gave the beautiful Princess Kalia such a beautiful rose. I've learned something new. Be good, stop fooling around. There's nothing between me and Princess Kalia. I'm not messing around. I'm just calmly telling you that this ranger, Aurelia Windrunner, is a little jealous. Well, the amount of vinegar there is about the same size as the Wind Lake. Hey. A wind lake with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers? So jealous? You call this calm? You call this Xiao? Just a mere only? Is it worth it? Duque turned his head back bitterly, but he caught a glimpse of Aurelia's sly smile from the corner of his eyes. Of course it's not worth it for the small matter before, but I'm going to be jealous for the big matter later. Don't ask me why I know. It's just a woman's intuition. On the other side, the proposal drama had already reached its climax. Presto's first offering was undoubtedly a failure. This Sir Lord's talent and knowledge were superior to all the other kings present. He knelt down resolutely on one knee. Because of his stature, even if he knelt down, he was still not much shorter than Kalia. This made Princess Kalia very uncomfortable. Almost subconsciously, she took a step back. Presto seemed to have activated his Casanova mode, directly using poetry to praise Kalia's beauty, already declaring his love for the princess. Duque's translation device could not completely translate Presto's poems. Seeing Tarina's, Xian, Salas, and Lang, who had a high standard in poetry, all showed an intoxicated expression, one could imagine how good this mysterious Sir Lord's literary skills were. Before Duque's transmigration, he was a super strong person who was proficient in everything, including the 3-character classic, 5-character verse, 7-character quatrains, 8-character essay, tang poetry, song poetry, etc. Unfortunately, Kalia's reaction was like a stone sinking into the ocean. For some reason, if it were any other princess or noble girl, they would definitely have fallen for these sweet words on the spot. Princess Kalia, who was famous for her weak personality, seemed to have eaten a weight of steel at this moment and just did not buy it. Ugh, why do I feel that the atmosphere is a little miserable and cold? My balls hurt. Tarina's also noticed something was wrong. After Presto finished reciting a poem, he had to interrupt. My child Kalia, such an outstanding young man. Not only is he of noble birth, but he is also extremely kind and wise. A young man like Davor Presto is a rare talent that only appears once in 1,000 years. He is different from those so-called heroes of unknown origins. Yes, Duque was unjustly implicated. Kalia held onto the hem of her dress with both hands, pursing her lips and not saying a word. Tarina's was at his wits' end. They had clearly agreed on this during dinner last night, and Kalia had accepted her fate. Why did she change her mind now? He had to make a big move. Lord Presto is the man who will soon become the king of Alterac. Only when he ascends to the throne can he ensure the peace of the Lordaeron Continent Alliance, and that hundreds of thousands of people will not starve to death in the coming year. Such an outstanding man, child, what are you hesitating for? You should know that there are not many men in this world who are worthy of you. At this moment, Princess Kalia's eyes were clearly filled with tears. But she still did not speak. Tarina's was also anxious and simply announced, I'm sorry everyone, my child seems to be a little too excited. As a father, I will agree to Lord Presto's proposal on her behalf. Then, since today is the day of victory for the Alliance, let us celebrate His Majesty Presto's ascension to the throne, and his engagement to my daughter Kalia. Alright, I'll ask you one last time. Regarding their matter, who agrees and who disagrees? It had to be said that the wedding customs of Azeroth were very similar to the Western wedding customs of Duque's pre-transmigration world. Before the ceremony, the priest would symbolically ask, who disagrees with the marriage between the bride and the groom? In 99% of the cases, this was just bullsh*t to go through the motions. But today, at this moment, that 1 in 10,000 chance had appeared. Kalia spoke again, and her words were earth-shattering. It was as if she had mustered every drop of courage in her body, and her voice was clearly trembling as if she was about to cry. Esteemed father, can I not marry Presto? Silence. Dead silence. Everyone was dead silent. What was going on? Not only were the faces of the kings very interesting, even Presto's face looked as if it had been smeared with something called a joke. It was very interesting. Turinas had painstakingly built up his forces, secretly suppressed Barav and put on a big show. Wasn't it all to help Presto rise to power, and then use the marriage to control Alterac? Chapter 603. Now the most important thing was that Princess Kalia was rebelling against him. At this moment many kings were laughing in their hearts. As the saying goes, if you are too smart you will end up hurting yourself. Wasn't this like shooting yourself in the foot? It was very rude to laugh at this time. But it was a big mistake to expect the impatient dwarves to be polite. Wahahaha. Ah. Turinas, your daughter doesn't even want to marry. Why are you still forcing her? The shameless Magni and Kudrin, the two distant relatives, hugged their bellies and laughed wildly. Then the great craftsman Jurban also let out a shrill laugh unique to dwarves. Countless veins popped out on Turina's forehead, and his old face swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He could no longer control himself and his voice became extremely sharp. Kalia, this is not the time for you to throw a tantrum. As a member of the Menethil royal family, your marriage has been destined to serve the country from the start. Let me tell you, you must marry Presto. Whether you like it or not, you will marry him. You can only marry him in this life and not any other man. Kalia was so wrong that she burst into tears. In the next second, Kalia burst out with an incomparably explosive statement. Duque, what are you waiting for? Have you forgotten what you promised me? Suddenly, the three unscrupulous dwarves stopped laughing. Suddenly, all the other kings and representatives focused their strange gazes on Duque, who had been pretending to be a passerby ever since the Bara family left. Suddenly, Duke was pushed to the top of the waves by Kalia's words. Ha. Ha ha. Wait. Something was wrong. That's right, Duke was ready to make his move. He had waited for so long just so that when Turina's drama reached its climax, he would kick Turinas from the clouds of luck he had been dreaming of and send him straight to hell. The problem was, in Duque's plan, Princess Kalia was not part of it. No, it should be said that helping the princess out of her predicament was just a convenience. That night, Duque did it purely because the system elf had told him that Princess Kalia is looking at you from the balcony of the palace. So Duque wanted to give Turinas a hard time. Now, because of Princess Kalia's words, the kings interpreted that the princess had an affair with Duque. If that was the case, everything could be explained. Why wasn't Princess Presto tempted by the marshal at all? Why was the princess prepared to counterattack with Duque's magic rose when Presto took out the ice rose sculpture? Why did the meek princess dare to go against the will of King Turinas? It was all because they had Duque as their backer. Even if the kings were not shameless at this moment, everyone's soul of gossip began to awaken, and it began to burn fiercely. Duque was embarrassed. Especially when he felt Aurelia's gaze on him, he finally understood why Aurelia had said that her jealousy was as big as Fengxing Lake. How could it not be big? His lover was entangled with the princess of the strongest human kingdom. If it was true love, maybe Aurelia would let him go. But it was a melodramatic entanglement without any feelings. It could only be used by bards to write poems and sing plays, but it was actually useless. Ahem. Legolas coughed softly. Ugh, why did it have to be time to go on stage? Duque looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, speechlessly, leaving a crocodile tear made of air. At this moment, Duque was possessed by Best Actor. At this moment, Duque was holding a non-existent little golden man in his left hand. He was like an actor who was about to step onto the podium and say that he had won the Best Actor award. He slowly stood up and Duke's voice, which was excessively young but familiar to all kings, sounded again. I'm sorry, Your Majesty Menethil. I firmly oppose Her Highness Kalia marrying the Lord of Presto. Well, the two dwarven kings exclaimed. Explosive. Too explosive. Were they going to stage a scene where the future king of Alterac's love was snatched away? Would this be the victory of a young couple who had pledged themselves to each other? Or would it end with the complete victory of Turinas, the old king who represented the evil forces? The king's spirit of gossip was burning brighter and brighter. What is your reason? Turinas said through gritted teeth. First, Please allow me and my servant to present Princess Kalia with a few gifts. Tarina's nodded in the end. He could see the joy in his daughter's expression. But he still did not understand why the situation had changed so drastically. Why was Duke still stubbornly fighting with him for the sake of the Bear family's daughter? But in the next moment he seemed to be on good terms with his daughter and seemed to want to recognize him as his father-in-law. What about Davar Pristo, the perfect chess piece? Duque left the stage, followed by Legolas, Sala, Goss and the bronze-skinned elf. The kings had been wondering about this strange combination ever since Lang and Anduin brought them in. After all, the people they brought in were basically their trusted aides such as Grand Dukes and so on. Only Lang and Anduin had unfamiliar guards. Duque brought a few elven guards with him. This combination was as strange as it could get. Of course, the one who was even more shocked was the Lord of Pristo. He seemed to have foreseen that Duque's appearance was a slap to his face. No matter how well-mannered he was, he would not hold back his hostility towards Duque. Duque glared back at him. However, Duque paid more attention to Princess Kalia. Duque, are you finally willing to stand up? Princess Kalia bit her lip and unconsciously played with her fingers on her abdomen. Yes, I'm here as promised, Duque answered confidently. You won't disappoint me, right? Of course not. The two of them seemed to be speaking in riddles, which made the kings even more anxious. Hey, Duque, show old Tarina's what tricks you have. Mag's jeering made Tarina's face turn even darker. At this time, Duque had already arrived between Kalia and the Lord of Pristo. He directly turned his back to the Lord of Pristo, who had already stood up. From Kalia's perspective, the shadow of the taller and bullier Pristo's body was enough to cover the whole of Duque. Duque ignored her and instead stepped forward to hold Princess Kalia's hand tightly. He then took a deep breath and shouted to Tarina's, "The reason I object to their union is, Lord Pristo is the wing of death." As soon as he finished speaking, Duque pulled Princess Kalia and flew out with flash. Almost at the same time, the brightest light shone behind them. Chapter 604. What? Since ancient times, there was no classic romance film without a love triangle. But wasn't the style changing too quickly? Even if it was to steal someone's love and turn it into hatred, shouldn't two men draw a line and set a date before dueling? Why did they suddenly attack? How did a romance film suddenly turn into a horror film? The four guards beside Duque, who seemed to be here to deliver gifts, suddenly opened the box, and a strong flash burst out from the box. The light from these flash bombs was controlled by the funnel-like reflective shield, and all of them shot at Lord Pristo's face, blinding him for at least a moment. Half of the kings were dumbfounded. Why was it half? Because the other half of the kings and their followers who were on good terms with Duque all heard Aurelia's anxious whisper of wind before they attacked. Danger. Pristo is the wings of death. This sentence was stuck half a second before Duque finished speaking. Dalen, Magni, Kale, Bats and the others were very good at fighting. For these fellows who had stepped into the realm of heroes, half a second was enough. Almost at the same time, Dalen pulled out his machete, Magni and the Muradin brothers activated Avatar, and Kale, that's waved his hand to cover himself with 3 magic shields. Not to mention Lang and Anduin, who were already prepared. Duque's appearance itself was the biggest signal. Almost at the moment when Duque said the words, "Wings of Death," Aurelia had already grabbed Lang's collar with one hand and Anduin with the other. With the help of the power of Storm, they rushed out of the throne room in less than half a second. In the arena, the most crucial arena, the 4 fellows who had deliberately changed their appearances had finally revealed their true forms. The first was Sala, the elven druid who had her eyes closed all this time. When she suddenly opened her eyes, 2 extremely strange rays of light shot out from her eyes, directly into Lord Presto's body. Lord Presto's tall and sturdy body trembled on the spot. On the other side was Legolas. In a thousandth of a second, the standard high elf eyes turned the color of molten gold, and 2 vertical pupils that resembled lava balls appeared. Slender red scales appeared on her forehead like lightning. The back of his head, which was originally empty, had many hard, long and sharp horns as if by magic. Her robe suddenly opened up, revealing a large piece of thick red scale armor. His arms suddenly lengthened and thickened, and a pair of incomparably sharp claws leapt out. He struck out with both his claws at Presto, who was in the middle of the battlefield. Not only her but the other two guards also attacked at the same time. The bronze-skinned guy held a long-handled warhammer with a head like a crab's leg and smashed it down. The blue-haired one suddenly pulled out a magnificent staff, and with a wave of his hand, a huge blue light shield appeared in front of all the kings. Duque had just carried Princess Kalia, who had turned pale, into a standard princess carry, and hid within the protection of the light shield. Everything actually happened in half a second. However, the situation changed too quickly and no one could really control the situation. At this moment, the dumbfounded Lord Presto, or rather the Wing of Death Nesario, who had been ambushed, was finally hit. At the last moment, at the most critical moment when he was about to be killed, Nesario suddenly came to his senses. Countless years of accumulated combat experience and combat instincts allowed him to twist his body. This allowed him to avoid the greatest crisis of death. He had only avoided instant death. After all, the ones who ambushed him were the life-giver Alexstrasza, the Queen of Dreams Isra, the King of Time Nosdormu, and the King of Magic Malygos, the four dragon aspects that had recovered their strength. It had to be said that Nesario's ultimate transformation spell was at the peak of perfection. He completely suppressed his power and transformed into a human that no one had seen before, isolating all possible leakage of the dragon aura and even soul fluctuations. Apart from refusing to accept any magical detection, even if Alexstrasza and Isra were to examine him in front of him, they would not be able to detect that he was the Wing of Death. Unfortunately, from the moment he heard the name de War Presto, the evil transmigrator Duque already knew that he was Nesario. That's right, Nesario had reached the limit of this disguise game, but Duque had cheated. He directly bypassed all the appearances and processes and reached the result. It was not that Nesario was not alert to Duque's four guards, but the problem was that the four Dragon Kings had used the same ultimate transformation spell under Duque's instigation. They had changed their appearance and aura. In the eyes of all the mortals, the four of them were just four blonde high elves. Unless Nesario dared to use Antonida's level of detection magic in front of everyone, he would never be able to tell that the four of them had used almost the same magic that he had used to reject detection. Hesitation, disbelief, and Nesario's pride in his ability to conceal himself had finally caused him to be ambushed. That's right. He had escaped the fate of being killed in seconds. This did not mean that he had escaped the sneak attack of the four Dragon Kings. Malygos' magic shield was not just for protection. This magic also turned into thousands of tiny magic needles on the ground at the same time, piercing into Nesario's legs. If Nesario was a standard dragon, this bit of damage would not even be able to pierce through his dragon skin. The problem was that he was in the human form with the lowest defense. In an instant, countless needle-sized lines of blood appeared on his legs. Nosdormu's warhammer smashed into Nesario's tilted head. He did not use all of his strength, but 70% of its power caused half of Nesario's head to cave in slightly from the corner of his left eyebrow to his temple. The most serious injury that Nesario suffered was Alexstrasza's claws. One of her claws tore apart the right side of his lower abdomen. The other claw completely penetrated his left lung, and 5 sharp dragon claws directly came out of his left chest. Dripping blood stained the 5 sharp claws. If Nesario was just a slightly stronger mortal creature, such an injury would be enough to put him on the countdown to death. But he was not. He was the Wing of Death Nesario, the former guardian of the earth. Since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, it was once the strongest giant dragon. Roar. At the same time, several loud dragon roars exploded in the throne room. Among them, Nethario's shrill and tragic roar was the most terrifying. Chapter 605. Several ferocious dragon roars reverberated through the air, causing every piece of glass in the throne room to shatter. The shards of glass shot out along with the violent air currents, killing and injuring many attendants and guards outside. This was not a dragon's breath, nor was it a bomb, but it was many times more terrifying than a mage's pyroblast. The long roars penetrated the deepest part of everyone's soul, reminding them of a legend that had almost been completely forgotten by the world. 10,000 years ago, that was the era of the dragons. Every creature that walked on the ground could be the prey of the dragons. Everything in the mortal world had to crawl under the wings of the dragons, afraid that they would attract the attention of the dragons and get themselves killed. Outside the throne room, there was still the sound of drums and music. The people who were celebrating the day of triumph did not disperse even after the triumphant procession had left the main road and started to parade around the city. This was because the kingdom of Lordaeron had also invited a large number of performers, strange clowns, costumed dancers, and all kinds of bands. Just a few seconds ago, even though it was early winter, the entire Lordaeron city was still immersed in a warm atmosphere. At this moment, the terrifying dragon roar that suddenly appeared broke all of this. The veterans who had just retreated from the front lines were fine. After facing the Crimson Dragon Legion's attacks day and night, almost all of them had developed a strong heart. The citizens of Lordaeron who had never seen a dragon were in big trouble. Because of fear, many people's hearts contracted due to excessive nervousness. Under sudden cardiac arrest, blood supply temporarily stopped, and everything in their field of vision turned pitch black. Under extreme fear, nearly 30% of them fainted just like that. Some unlucky people even fell from the balcony. They could not be blamed. The shocking dragon might of the 5 great dragon kings was not something mortals could resist. For a moment, the entire Lordaeron city was in a mess. In fact, the throne room was also in a mess. Under the gaze of all the kings, the tall and burly Davar Priester suddenly released a flaming shockwave. This was not a simple shockwave. It contained extremely high energy, and the other dragon kings did not dare to face it head-on. Or rather, which of these ultimate Azeroth masters who had lived for countless years did not have a few trump cards that could save their lives? He was unable to determine what this move was all about. He could only be sure that this was a terrifying skill that even the 4 great dragon kings could only avoid. After shaking off Alexstrasza and Nosdormu, he began to transform. In front of every single king, Presto's head turned into a miniature pitch-black dragon head. A pair of wings grew larger and larger on his back while his limbs grew thicker and thicker. His once white and smooth skin was now covered in a layer of cuticle. Not only him but the other 4 dragon kings also transformed at the same time. It grew larger and larger, more and more terrifying. In just a few moments, it had surpassed the range that a human's field of vision could accommodate at close range. It was foreseeable that in less than 5 seconds, the entire magnificent throne room would be burst apart by the 5 terrifyingly large ancient dragons. Let's go. It was unknown how Duque cast the spell, but the walls in the 4 directions of the hall were suddenly pierced by 4 huge icicles. These 4 completely hollow icicles were like a giant ice slide that led straight to the royal garden outside the hall. Daelin, Magni, and the rest jumped into the ice slide without hesitation and escaped smoothly. Jean, Salas, and Antonidas hesitated for a moment before sliding out with their people. Only Tyrrhena's, things had changed too quickly. Even now he still could not believe his eyes. Oh my God! What have I done? That's right, the nobles in the country were seething with resentment. Their territories had been burned to the ground, and the capital had almost been conquered. They had formed the alliance, but they did not have the kind of influence that they had. In order to make up for all this, Tyrrhena's did not hesitate to offend the other alliance to take over Alterac. He even risked opposition from half of the alliance to use his authority as the alliance master to impeach an important minister of another country who had never truly betrayed the alliance. And then what did he gain? His beloved daughter did not listen to him and actually joined forces with Duque, whom he had failed to recruit. The lord that he trusted completely and was willing to promote as the king of Alterac was actually the infamous Deathwing Nisario, who was proven to be the one who caused the Red Dragon army to side with the orcs. That was Neltharion. For tens of thousands of years he had caused countless deaths and destruction and destroyed countless cities. He was one of the most evil beings in the world of human scholars, historians, and bards on countless occasions. Tyrrhena's could not imagine how the people would react when they found out that they were almost used by Deathwing, and that they had helped Deathwing become the king of Alterac. No. Today's losses might be great. Even if he had to pay a higher price, he had to shut the mouths of the various kings as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he were to be accused of being in cahoots with Deathwing, he would not be able to hold his position as the alliance master. Yes. I am also a victim of Deathwing's scheme. When Tyrrhena's finally completed the great achievement of plan completion, he suddenly realized that the plan he had just completed could be thrown into the gutter. Because the red dragon queen Alexstrasza hit Nesario with her dragon tail, and when Nesario was about to rise into the sky, the red dragon queen, who did not seem to know Tarina's suffering, shouted in the human language, "Nesario, your end is here. Don't think that we won't be able to find you just because you have become the Lord of Presto and hide under Menethel's protection." The roar was so loud and clear. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians who had gathered in Lordaeron for the victory ceremony all heard it. Wow, King Menethil actually... No one dared to believe their ears, but the behemoth that was almost half the size of a town in the sky did exist. The flames under its wings were like a cloud of fire, and the corrosive liquid that was fanned out when the giant wings flapped was like a drizzle of stars. They were obviously inconspicuous droplets of liquid, but they were extremely corrosive. When these fine droplets were sprinkled on the palace below, they easily corroded the tiles, walls, statues, and ground, not to mention humans. Any creature that came into contact with a little bit of it would be instantly corroded, along with their armor, skin, and muscles. Chapter 606. Just a few flaps of the wings of death had caused the entire Lordaeron palace to fall into destruction. This was the result of Malygos following Duque's instructions to prevent the battle from spreading too far. He tried to use a huge ring-shaped wind wall to lock the battle in the sky above the palace. If not for Malygos, half of Lordaeron would have instantly turned into hell. No, I didn't do it. Tarina's had a mental breakdown. He could not imagine how the people of Lordaeron, or even the entire human world, would scold him after the sun rose tomorrow. In his days he seemed to hear countless voices saying, "Look, Tarina's, that blind idiot actually wants to put the most evil black dragon on the noble throne." No, 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 the scepter in Tarina's hand had already fallen to the ground. He opened his arms and waved them around, completely ignoring the countless pieces of rubble raining down from the top of the throne hall. Suddenly he was held down by Mograine and Abendis, one on the left and one on the right. "Your Majesty, run." It had to be said that the High Lord Mograine was an extremely loyal subject. He did not lack loyalty, courage, or leadership. It was only at this moment that Tarina suddenly came back to his senses and felt a surge of warmth in his heart. But the next moment, when he realized that he had to rely on Duque's ice slide to escape, he lost control of his emotions again. "No, I don't want to use Duque's things." Yes. He already hated Duque. It was Duque who argued with him. It was Duque who did not let him have it easy. It was Duque who did not inform him that Presto was actually Nesario. Yes, in a sense he had guessed correctly. But, that... what? His Radiant Moon Mage guards had become useless because of the Blue Dragon King's absolute control of the surrounding magical elements. Other than Duque, whom Malygos had specially opened the back door for, all the mages in the entire palace had become weak chickens. Mograine and Abendis were not gods, and they did not have the holy light to activate Holy Shield. Other than Duque, there was no other way out. If you have the ability, don't use it. Mograine and Tiramisu didn't care. They grabbed Tarina's and jumped down. Perhaps because of a certain person's dark heart, this ice skating path was a little thorny. Just as he was about to reach the garden, the great King Tarina's Menethil's robe was torn apart, and he could only scurry away with his bare buttocks. On the other side, the 4 dragon kings that followed Nesario into the sky had already become extremely huge. Their gigantic bodies cast a shadow from the sky that covered 2 to 3 city blocks. Red, green, blue, and bronze, the 4-colored dragon bodies shone brightly under the dazzling sunlight. Each dragon was shrouded in a halo of sunlight. The halos with a holy aura seemed to declare the supreme majesty of the world of Azeroth's guardian dragons. Alexstrasza, who was in the lead, raised her head and stared at the trembling black dragon in the sky with her golden-yellow pupils that were like lava flames. She could clearly see the anger and fear in the eyes of this cunning, cruel, and traitorous black dragon. She was not in a hurry after surrounding her old opponent. She slowly and elegantly spread her huge wings, dispersing all the dust and debris that were brought up when she broke through the roof of the throne hall. Deathwing's condition was already very bad. Due to the serious injury he had suffered in his human form, this injury was directly reflected in his dragon form. One of Nesario's left eyes could no longer open, the left side of his head had a slight sense of collapse, and a horn on the upper left had disappeared. Similarly, there was a huge wound on the left side of his chest and the right side of his abdomen. The scales on that area had all disappeared, the dragon's skin was flipped open and the muscles were rolled back. One could even see flames that did not belong to him rolling around in the wound. That was the Red Dragon Queen's flame of life. For most creatures it was a great tonic, but for Neltharion, it was the most potent poison. At this moment, Nesario's crazy red eyes no longer had the arrogance of the king of the world. Instead he had the timidity of a thief who was afraid of being beaten to death after being caught. Why are you able to sense my existence? My plan should have been perfect. My disguise should have been perfect. Why? Is it really that kid named Duque? Nesario roared in shock and anger. Ha! You underestimate me too much, Nesario. The Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu grinned loudly. His mouth, which was made of sand, was not sharp and looked as ridiculous as a sculpture. However, the power of time that flowed through his mouth was not funny at all. You. Of all the things you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have become a human. This has reduced the difficulty of peeping into your future. I happen to see all of this. Anyway, Duque had repeatedly told him not to betray him and even made up this excuse for Nozdormu. Nozdormu went with the flow and pretended to be pretentious. Damn it. How did I bump into it? Nesario felt that he was completely black. He was very clear about the strength of his old brother. Nozdormu would not often peep into the future because it was very laborious and required him to pay some kind of price. He now regarded this as Nozdormu peeking into countless fragments of the future. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack to see what he had done. If this was not black, what was it? Nesario, repent for your sins. Malaigos, who hated Nesario the most, let out the loudest roar of anger since his appearance. When there was no need to protect the weak humans, that was when Malaigos would really go all out. It wasn't that Nesario hadn't thought about whether he could take advantage of Malaigos not launching a sneak attack this time, and instead covering for the human kings. When he saw Malaigos' eyes, which were still filled with anger and hatred, he immediately knew that Malaigos had done this because of some agreement. But now Malaigos had no scruples. If he used humans as a cover, some people might feel the heartache, but Malaigos would definitely not hesitate to kill him along with the ant-like humans below him. Nesario's brain was about to crash. Even when he was at his peak, he couldn't defeat his 4 brothers and sisters who had recovered their strength, let alone him who was already injured. Now he was even more injured. If he hadn't been injured, he wouldn't have had so much time to pretend to be a human and attempt to overthrow the alliance. He looked at the 4 dragon aspects that were in perfect formation, waiting to be slaughtered by the dragon aspects. Nesario was in despair. What should I do? What should I do? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.